The smell of rain-damp heather drifted across the camp outside Bitterbridge, as Robb Stark guided Grey Wind through the puddled lanes between pavilions. Dawn had broken in hues of pewter and violet, the river road misting like a half-forgotten dream beneath the sky. Yet tents still glimmered with torch flame. Cooks stirring cauldrons, farriers hammering out the day's first shoes, pages rubbing sleep from their eyes. Nerves trembled through every gesture. Tens of thousands of hearts waited on one morning's bargain. Robb felt the old ache in his thigh where the boar's tusk had grazed him months before, a memento of his first pitched battle at the Whispering Wood. He breathed through it, straightened, set his shoulders square as a shield's rim. Grey Wind padded ahead, muzzle lifting to test the sense of so many unfamiliar men. Stormlanders, Reachmen, riverfolk sworn to houses too minor to find much ink in Old Town's ledgers, yet all gathered now under the green banner of the crowned stag within the rose. Renly Baratheon possessed a gift for drawing men the way a hearth draws chill bones. But Robb knew charisma could melt like snow if not buttressed by steel and sober purpose. Ahead, a wide strip of earth had been trampled flat as a tourney-yard. At its center stood Renly's command pavilion. Wall hangings of deep forest velvet, the crowned stag stitched in golden thread so heavy the panel hung like mail. Before the hatchway, Brienne of Tarth planted her longsword point down in the soil and watched the young wolf approach. Her eyes, earnest and pale, assessed every twitch of Robb's reins. "My lord," she said, voice rough with sleepless vigil. "His grace is within." "Sir," Robb answered, though he doubted the Lady of Tarth cared a whit for titles minted in a man's mouth rather than on the anvil of custom. "Is Sir Bryce with him?" "Sir Bryce, Sir Loras, Lord Mattis Rowan, Lord Randyll Tarly, Maester Kai." Brienne's gaze flicked to Grey Wind, who regarded her with quiet menace. "And the Queen, Lady Margaery, I mean. They await you." Grey Wind's hackles lowered, satisfied. Robb dismounted, gave his gauntlets to Oliver Frey, and ducked into the pavilion. Renly sat bareheaded at the high table, raven dark hair loose upon an embroidered mantle of Tyrell green. Sunlight sliced through the tent's parted seams, falling in golden bars across the maps strewn before him. Chalked lines forager patrols had traced through villages south of the Blackwater, red wax tokens marking the Lannister strength along the Rose Road. The Storm King's smile appeared effortless, but Robb read tension in the shallow crease between his brows. Lord Randyll Tarly inclined his head in curt salute. "King in the North," he greeted. Robb returned the nod. "Lord Tarly." He took the place offered at Renly's right hand, conscious of Tyrell eyes assessing every heartbeat. Loras lounged to one side, armor polished bright as pondwater in autumn sun-dyed day. Margaery, seated opposite, poured wine with steady grace, starry septa blue framing her curls. "I bid you welcome to the green heart of my host," Renly said, voice smooth as the arbor red he swirled. "May this council end as sweet upon the tongue." Robb lifted his cup but did not drink. "Words can be sweet," he agreed, "yet words did not keep my father's head upon his shoulders." An uneasy hush followed. Margaery lowered the pitcher. Loras's fingers drummed his cup. Renly inclined his head, accepting the barb. "Nor did they keep my brother Robert from the crypts of Storm's End," he said quietly. "Which is why we meet, to see whether swords may be guided by oaths rather than the other way round." Robb laid his gauntleted fist upon the map. "Tight. My bannermen ride on King's Landing even now. Roose Bolton skirts the trident, Lord Glover secures the neck. But I do not crave a throne for myself. I crave justice, first for Ned Stark, and then for a realm that has bled enough. Your grace claims the Iron Throne. Swear before these lords you will redress the crimes of the Lannisters, and I will bend every sword of the North and the Riverlands to your purpose." "No northern coin?" Lord Randyll asked, voice like gravel grinding beneath siege timber. "The king's taxes build the roads, keep the harbors dredged, fill the granaries. My folk will raise no levy for a crown forged in the south," Robb answered without looking at him. "The North remembers overlong the taste of freedom. Yet if we march as allies, we need hammer out silver none other can assay. Shared honor." Renly leaned forward. "Suppose Cersei opens the gates at word of our grand alliance?" What then of the boy who sits upon the throne? Some call him the anointed king. Some call him the issue of incest, Robb said, which the faith condemns and the realm fears. Let the High Septon try that question if need be. My thought lies on a swifter path. Say it, Loras urged, tone bright as drawn steel. Offer the boy safe passage to Dragonstone. Let Stannis judge his own blood. Robb's gray eyes held Renly's green. You are well loved. Stannis is respected, if not adored. The realm will welcome mercy tempered by law, though Stannis may scowl at both. Sir Bryce Caron chuckled dryly. Stannis scowls at candlelight on Frostfall Eve. Renly's mouth curved, but the smile did not reach his eyes. I could stomach mercy if the boy is truer lion than stag. Yet there is another matter. The North forswore the crowns of the dragon after the Field of Fire, yet now raises one of its own. How shall the small folk understand two kings marching beneath one banner? Robb drew his dagger and laid the pommel upon the map, north of the neck. The North was never conquered by dragons. Torrhen Stark knelt to spare his folk the fate of Harrenhal. We bent because no hope lay in defiance. But yield does not become fealty when the covenant is broken. The Lannisters spilled the blood of the hand my father served and threw wide the door to treachery. We named a king in answer. We named a king in answer. He sheathed the dagger. But no king rules forever. Bind our houses in blood and justice will stand where pride might falter. Now, Margaery Tyrell spoke softly then. First words she had lent to the council. A marriage. Silence gathered again, like ravens upon a bare branch. Renly looked to his wife with mild surprise, and something like admiration. You would see Winterfell's direwolf wed to Storm's End stag. Direwolf and Rose, perhaps, she said, and her eyes slid to Robb. My brother Willis is Lord of the North March. A good man, though his leg is crooked. Yet if the North seeks justice and the Reach seeks peace, a union of our houses might temper the realm's quarrel. Then? Tarly scowled. Loras sat straighter, mouth parted. Robb weighed the notion. He had promised nothing more to any Frey than his friendship, and Roose Bolton's muttered offers of the Maid of Dreadfort had found no purchase in his heart. I know Willis only by repute, Robb said, voice careful. But I hold the Reach in respect. Still, marriage demands more than convenience. Convenience is a root that often flourishes, Margaery observed with a smile fleeting as Willow downed. In time, it may sprout affection. Robb thought of Jane Westerling waiting in Riverrun's tower. A comfort in days of wound and weary, her voice lilting as Sweetwater song. Yet he had given her only quiet promise, not vows sealed before Godswood or Septe. 5 years of spring might pass before the North knew peace enough to celebrate a bride's arrival. He clasped Grey Wind's bone-white fur fused into the furred collar at his throat, drew strength. If Lord Willis is content to ride beyond the neck, Robb said, to break bread beneath the heart tree of Winterfell, and swear he will never urge the North again to bow, then I shall consider it. Renly's fingers drummed the table. And what of our road south? Every day we dally. Cersei braids fresh poison. Strike at once, Robb answered. Send riders tonight to Lord Hightower, with orders to seal Old Town's harbor. Let the fleet of the Arbor sail up the Mander and bar the Blackwater's mouth. We march together along the Roserad, River Lords and Northern Spears on your left, Stormlanders and Reachmen on your right. What garrison dares stand against such thunder? Nemidas. Lord Randall snorted. Gold cloaks have more appetite for coin than courage. Yet this talk of mercy may chill our blades. Cersei will slit the boy's throat herself before surrender. A lion dies with claws unsheathed. Robb lifted a brow. Then we occupy the city before her claws close. If Grey Wind can slip through the outer sewer tunnels, my men can open the King's Gate from within. Renly's eyes widened a shade. You propose to trust a direwolf to scout hidden ways? He is no pet, Robb said quietly. He is Northborn as truly as I. The tent flap parted. Catelyn Stark stepped inside wrapped in a rain-dark cloak, auburn hair damp against her temples. Behind her, Maester Vyman bore a parchment packet. Robb, she said, eyes measuring the faces arrayed. "I beg pardon, your grace." To Renly, she offered a grave curtsy. "Word from Riverrun rides swifter than we hoped." Robb felt his stomach tighten. "Mother." She broke the seal and spread a letter across the table. "Sir Edmure reports Tywin Lannister quit Harrenhal 4 nights past. His host marches west along the Blackwater, perhaps to relieve King's Landing, or perhaps to fall upon this alliance before it flowers." Seated lords muttered, cups rattled. Even Loras Tyrell's bright composure dimmed. Renly tapped a finger upon the parchment. "If my brother, if Stannis, moves from Dragonstone to the mouth of the Blackwater as rumor claims, the Lion may find his path barred, or Tywin may crush Stannis before he draws sword." Randyll Tarly growled. "The hand of the king, false or true, has tasted 100 fields. He is no jousting princeling." Robb felt loom of decision stretched taut. Threads of men's lives, realms' futures, knotted here. "Then we march within the day," he said. "Bolton's outriders will harry Tywin's rear. Lord Tarly, will your swords clear the Roseroda's fortresses?" "Aye," Tarly admitted. "Though I dislike a race against shadows. Better a race than a rout." Robb turned to Renly. "I will not claim the power to command your host, but I pledge the North will flank you as vassals might flank their lord. Let us ride." "Namnos." Renly studied him, a slow breath filling his lungs. When he spoke, it was to Margaery. "Send word to Sir Courtenay at Storm's End, a raven this hour. Tell him we march with wolves as brothers." Margaery inclined her head, eyes luminous with something like hope and calculation twined together. Catelyn Stark bowed slightly, relief easing her brow. Robb drank the wine at last. It tasted of apples and deep summer sun, a warmth from soils he had never trod. He set the cup down, heart drumming. 5 hours later, the fields around Bitterbridge thundered beneath iron-shod hooves. Banners streamed in damp wind, direwolf gray, crowned stag on green, rose around golden swords, trident blue on river silver. Robb rode at Renly's left, gray wind loping ahead like some ghost of ancient winter. Behind them, Catelyn watched the boy she had nursed ride among kings, and wondered at the price mothers paid for honor and peace. At dusk on the second day, the allied host encamped by the ruins of Summerhall. The sad broken stones of the old Targaryen folly lay half swallowed by ivy, their blackened hearts exposed where dragonfire had licked a mad king's dream. Robb walked within the tumbled courtyard while sentries posted lanterns on pitted merlons above. Gray wind sniffed the air, then froze, ears cocked. A boy emerged from the shadow of a collapsed ark. 12 years. Small, quick, hair the color of hammered copper. He wore the direwolf badge of House Stark upon a jerkin cut, for a man grown but hastily stitched to fit his narrow shoulders. "Rickon," Robb whispered, stunned. His little brother's chin lifted in defiance. "You left me at Winterfell while you rode to war. I rode after with the Umbers." Shaggy Dog padded from the gloom, black fur shimmering, eyes green as the hemp glow kindled grass along the King's Road. "I won't be left again." Robb knelt, hands trembling, and gathered Rickon to his breast. The boy smelled of horse, pine tar, and the distant snowfields of their home. "The road is no place for children." "I'm a wolf," Rickon said fiercely. "Wolves run in a pack." Emotion burned behind Robb's eyes like tears unshed. He looked up at Grey Wind, who brushed his muzzle against Shaggy Dog's flank. A low whine passed between them. "Recognition, welcome." "We ride where swords clash," Robb murmured. "Where men may die." "Father died," Rickon answered, voice small yet unbroken. "He died because the South killed him." "I want to see the South answer." Behind them, soft steps. Catelyn appeared, face stricken to see her youngest. "Rickon, sweetling." She pressed a palm to her mouth, fighting the tide of relief and fear. "How?" A dozen Umbers broke the back gate on bearskin sledges and swept him to Torrhen Square. Came a new voice. Great John Umber strode forward, grin broad beneath his snowy beard. Little Wolf threatened to swim the moat else. "Better he run beneath my banner than drown. He's fast on a horse, kept up with the vanguard." Catelyn's shoulders sagged. And did you think to tell his mother? The Greyjohn offered a rueful shrug. If I'd turned him aside, he'd be lost on the road alone. This way he's watched. Robb rose, steady now. The die is cast. Rickon stays, but he rides in the baggage train with Maester Vyman and Sir Wendell. No swordplay, no skirmish line. Rickon bristled but nodded. I swear it. On the honor of House Stark, Robb pressed. On our father's grave, Rickon said, voice quavering yet resolute. Catelyn gathered him, tears bright on her lashes. Robb watched mother and son beneath crumbling walls, and vowed silently to end the war before Shaggy Dog's pup snarl became a hunter's howl. By the 6th day, the Roserad lay behind them, harboring only ash and scattered Lannister pennons. Scouts reported the gold cloaks drilling upon the city walls, but few men of Casterly Rock manned the ramparts. Tywin's main strength had hurried east toward the Blackwater, intent upon crushing the Scratch fleet his spies claimed Stannis mustered. When Renly's outriders harried the rear guard south of Zow's Horn, the lions broke and fled, horses lathered to skeletons beneath the dusk. King's Landing shimmered before the horizon like a mirage, red walls gilded by afternoon glare, the great Sept's domes pale as bone. Robb felt history pulse there, ancient and perilous. He had never crossed the Blackwater rush, never seen the gilded sprawl of Flea Bottom, or smelled the rotting fish at the Mudgate, yet tales whispered by Winter's Hearth returned now, like crows to a rookery. Here, Aegon the Conqueror had waded ashore with dragons banking overhead. Here, Rhaenys had watched the Sept of Remembrance burn. Here, his father had marched triumphant at Robert's side, only to be slain 2 decades later by those same Hall's intrigues. At night they made camp in the apple orchards of Bronzegate, lanterns glowing among boughs heavy with late summer fruit. Rain threatened, the air clung to skin like fever. Renly convened council in a wind-bent barn, beams sagging but stout. Candlelight scattered as the door slammed, revealing banners pinned to rafters. The dire wolf, the rose stag, the crossed long axes of House Tarly. Catelyn lingered outside with Maester Vyman and little Rickon, while within Robb studied the parchment Brienne unrolled. Sewage diagrams stolen from Casterly engineers who repaired the city's underways 2 reigns earlier. They left drainage grates beneath the river gate unbarred, Brienne explained, tapping a charcoal mark. High tide covers the slats. Low tide leaves 4 feet of air. Enough for a man without mail, Robb said. Much rides upon the tide, Renly mused. We could feign assault at the Lion Gate while our river folk slip in here, open the Salaport, and raise the portcullis. Lord Rowan stroked his beard. Too many eyes on the walls, fewer beneath their own feet. Robb pointed to a secondary culvert farther north. If we split, half dive here, half here. If one fails, the other may yet open a gate. Tarly frowned. Cutting our strength thin in dark tunnels courts disaster. Grey wind can scent guards, Robb countered. He warned silently. Renly studied the map. Very well. Bolton's spearmen will lead one squad, Sir Garland Tyrell the other. At the first bell tomorrow night. Men. Robb caught subtle tension flick between Loras and Roose Bolton's son, Domeric, who stood at his father's side. Bolton's pale eyes shimmered as candlelight flickered. Something in that gaze unsettled Robb, but the plan could ill afford mistrust now. He pressed quill to parchment, bent to inscribe his oath upon the scheme. Thunder muttered overhead as he finished. Sheets of rain began to fall, drumming hollow upon the barn's slate roof. Wind's applause for fate set in motion. When Robb stepped outside, the orchard smelled of crushed leaves and raw promise. Catelyn waited beneath a dripping awning, cloak drawn tight. She studied her eldest, lips pressed with worry. You give your trust easy as you draw breath, she said. He smiled thinly. Trust wins wars no more than steel. But we need both, and men follow trust better than they follow fear. Fear might keep a dagger from your back. A dagger is a narrow road, mother. We need a king's high road, broad enough for peace to march. She touched his cheek as rain spattered her sleeve. You speak like a man grown. I am, he answered gently. Even if I would rather stand tonight in Winterfell's hall with snow melting in my hair. The wind lashed rain sideways. Somewhere beyond the orchard walls, the allied armies knelt, greasing bowstrings, sharpening spear points for an assault, perhaps bloodless, perhaps redder than the trident. Robb inhaled, felt the wet chill sink into his bones, and wondered whether Ned watched from the halls of his fathers to see whether his son would match the measure history demanded. The next day dawned weeping. Clouds huddled low, river fog swathing the assembled banners. From atop a rise studded with cracked marble icons of the Seven, Robb watched the host array. Renly center gleamed in bronze and bright enamels, the likes of which Northmen spied only in southern ballads. The Stormlords formed the right wing, spiked with Baratheon antlered helms. The north and riverlands held the left, subdued hues of pine, slate, and river foam, broken by stark gray and tully silver trout. He found Lord Roose Bolton among his ranks, pale as bleached parchment, crimson leech on pale throat, betraying a recent cupping. "Lord Bolton," Robb greeted, "your son leads the sewer breach. Keep him close." Bolton's eyes, a calm, depthless pink, betrayed no offense. "Domeric will not disappoint." Robb's war council parted around the flayed man banner with quiet unease. He moved on, offering words to Greatjon. Lady Mormont astride her shaggy northern Garin, Sir Brynden Tully in river blue. Every face turned solemn beneath the drizzle, yet resolve shone there stronger than steel. At the hour of the wolf, gray wind slipped across muddy flats to the river gate culvert. Night's dying embers tinged the clouds violet. A seabird's cry echoed over brackish water. Robb waited with Roose's spear-bearers, breath misting. When gray wind did not return, anticipation twisted in his gut like a fresh gut-hing rope. Sudden flames flickered along the eastern wall, torches rocked by commotion. Then a horn low and sonorous boomed twice from within the city. The portcullis at the river gate inched upward. A dark figure waved the direwolf banner from beneath its iron teeth. Robb wheeled his mount. "Blow all horns. Advance at the trot." Wind ripped the rain into sheets that stung his eyes. The allied host surged, hooves sucking from mud with hollow pops. Robb drew his sword, Ice's younger echo, forged at River Run when the smiths could not temper Valyrian steel. Lightning cracked above, illuminating the Blackwater plain in lurid silver. A ragged cheer rose from the walls, gold cloaks dropping pikes fleeing. The river gate yawned. Robb drove through the arch, gray wind bounding ahead. The city beyond smelled of wet stone, night soil, and candle smoke. Bells pealed, a frantic clangor swiftly drowned by the thunder of host filling streets. Renly's stag banner followed the direwolf by mere heartbeats. Robb turned toward the hill of the Red Keep, mind racing. They must secure the royal sept, the Tower of the Hand, the dungeons. If Cersei still commanded pockets of Lannister guards, she might turn Flea Bottom into a maze of slaughters. Downriver, cannon roar erupted. Wildfire on the Blackwater, a column of green flame licking the sky. Robb glimpsed the conflagration through a break in rooftops. Ships ablaze, men screaming upon decks. Stannis' fleet had reached the mouth just as Margaery's ravens predicted, only to meet the alchemist's fury Cersei had hoarded. Yet while heat scorched the river, the castle lay distracted. "Seize Maegor's hold fast," Robb ordered Lord Karstark. "Find Queen Cersei alive if possible, dead if she resists." Karstark spurred away. The rain slackened as allied banners flowed over cobblestones like a living tide. Shutters flew open. Small folk peered wide-eyed. A smith hoisted his child atop his shoulders to watch direwolves pass. Some cried, others cheered. A barefoot woman knelt at Robb's passing, whispering, "Bring us bread, my lord." Gray wind halted at a crossroads, one street climbing toward the great sept of Beeler, the other slanting past the street of silk. From the septi came louder bells. Panic. Robb chose that path, trusting Renly to sweep the keep. The direwolf loped ahead, silent as winter stars. They found the sept doors guarded by knights of the Kingsguard, Sir Meryn Trant and Sir Boros Blount, staring in disbelief at the gray tide pouring uphill. Robb raised his sword. "Yield, sir." He offered them the chance with voice alone. Sir Meryn sneered, lifting bloody steel. "A stark boy king commands me. Come taste a lion's fang? 4 northern archers, loosed as one. Shafts hissed. Trant staggered back, throat pierced, helm ringing upon marble. Cerberus dropped his weapon, eyes wide, belly quivering. Robb signaled Tito's Blackwood forward to disarm him. Within the sept, torches guttered. The High Septon huddled before the mother's statue, face pale as curdled milk. Beside him stood Joffrey Baratheon, pale blonde hair disheveled, cheeks streaked with what tears or rain. Behind the boy, Cersei clasped his shoulders like a jailer her charge, wildcat glare fixed upon Robb. "Traitor," she hissed. "You break sacred ground of the Seven." Robb crossed the marble floor, gray wind matching pace. "I enforce sacred oaths broken the day your son claimed a crown, birthed in incest." Cersei laughed, brittle as broken glass. "You think the small folk care whose seed quickened in my womb? They care bread and safety. You gave them neither," Robb said. Joffrey lunged suddenly, drawing a dagger of gilded steel, blade slick with rubies in the candlelight. He dove at Robb, youthful, reckless. Gray wind met him mid-stride, jaws closing around the dagger hand. The boy shrieked, blade clattering. Blood beaded on ivory fangs. Cersei screamed, striking Grey Wind's flank with clenched fists. The dire wolf released, stepping back, hackles raised. Robb caught Joffrey's collar to steady him. "Enough," he said, voice soft but iron-veined. "Your hand is not severed. You will live. You will sail for Dragonstone under guard. There Stannis Baratheon will weigh your claim." "Stannis is nothing," Joffrey spat, eyes bright with terror. "Then you lose nothing by his judgment," Robb answered. Cersei's shoulders shook with silent fury. "You kill me, and the realm will drown in blood. I serve the realm by ending the blood you spilt first." The High Septon raised trembling hands. "Gods have mercy. No blades within the sept." Robb sheathed his sword. "You have my word. Escort the queen to her chambers. Place her under gentle guard. Ensure she writes no ravens." Karstark entered breathless then. Maegor's holdfast secured. No resistance. The King's Guard surrendered. Robb nodded. "Have Sir Loras join me here. We stand vigil until Renly arrives." Metapond. In the streets beyond, horns blared victory. Rain ceased at last, clouds parting to reveal half a moon. Robb turned to Lady Catelyn, who had followed unseen to the doorway, worry etched deep as river canyons. She gazed upon her son, the boy who had chased snow hares through Winterfell's godswood, now holding a kingdom's fate like an egg in calloused hands. 5 hours, she whispered, as if marking a span of breath since their march began. Robb met her eyes and knew the road ahead would be longer than leagues could measure. Yet for the first time since the raven from King's Landing had borne Ned's doom, hope flared, fragile, luminous, worth every cut. And outside, the bells of the sept rang, not in terror now, but as if heralding dawn, though night still cloaked the city. Somewhere in that dark, the small folk listened, wondering whether the sound meant sorrow or salvation, whether tomorrow's sun would rise over peace or fresh war. Robb Stark vowed beneath the gaze of the Seven and the old gods north of the wall that he would make the bells ring for peace. He tightened his grip on his sword's hilt and waited for Renly's footsteps to echo through the sacred hall. Rainwater still clung in shining beads to the marble floor of the great sept when Renly Baratheon slipped through the western doors at the head of a dozen rainbow guards. Their boots left prints like dark petals on the stone. Torchlight trailed behind them in long, uncertain blades that made the statues of the Seven seem to ripple and breathe. The direwolf banner was already planted beside the mother's altar, the white wolf head glowering back at the crowned stag on green. Robb could feel the sudden hush wash down the nave as Renly's gaze took in the blood that still spattered the tiles where Sir Meryn had fallen, the bandage on Joffrey's wrist, the hard fury beneath Cersei's pale composure. Renly's mantle was soaked through, the rain having flattened the velvet into something almost black. Yet even drenched, he carried the easy grace of a man accustomed to victory. He halted half an arm's length from Robb, close enough that the north remembered the south's perfumes. citrus oil, fresh mace, a hint of rose. And the south tasted winter on the air, pine pitch and cold iron and hidden snow. "You have taken his blade and his crown?" Renly asked, voice pitched so that only the inner ring of lords could hear. Robb shook his head. "The crown is still on the Iron Throne. The blade is in his scabbard, and his hand is bound. No blood but his own this hour, and even that gray wind took clean." Neo-wide. Joffrey sat on a low stool below the father's statue, cradling his crimson-wrapped hand. Someone, likely Sir Loras, had wedged a split apple beneath the ruined fingers so they would set straight. The boy's petulant mouth quivered with a mixture of pain and resentful awe. He could not decide whether to glare at Robb, at Renly, or at the direwolf sprawled like a living shadow beside its master's boots. Renly looked to Cersei. "My lady, will you yield the city?" "I yield nothing to a traitor's brother and a rebel's whelp," she hissed. Robb heard Sir Bryce Caron exhale behind him, a weary sound. Before anyone could shape another threat, the High Septon eased forward, his voice papery and high. "Her Grace is distraught, my lords. Let her be conducted to her apartments under holy watch. Anger spoken in such a place is no true oath." Renly gave the faintest nod. "Lady Catelyn, be so kind as to escort the queen to the maiden vault yourself. Tully honor will guard her better than any chain." "Then no." Catelyn accepted with a stiff curtsy. She gathered half a dozen river knights and led Cersei and the remaining gold cloaks away through the northern transept. The queen went without struggle now, her eyes fixed on the stones beneath her feet, as if she sought to remember every crack for later vengeance. When the doors thudded shut, Renly turned to the boy. "Joffrey Waters," he said, quiet and implacable. "Stand." The name struck like a lash. Joffrey's jaw snapped up. He swayed but rose. "I am the king." "You were proclaimed king," Renly replied. "A different matter. I will have your heads." Robb flexed his gauntlet. "And who will swing the sword?" The boy trembled. "Tywin will come." He will," Robb said. "Which is why you sail before first light. You may pray the wind favors you more than wildfire." Joffrey's next words stuck like thorns in his torn throat. The High Septon murmured a short blessing. Rainbow Guard flankers stepped forward, fastening light manacles of silvered iron around the prince's wrists and elbows. A King's Guard cloak was draped over his shoulders, more as shroud than regalia. Renly watched until the doors had closed on that too. Then he blew out a long breath that fluttered the damp hair on his forehead. 3 pieces off the board in an hour. You play Savas well, Stark." Robb sheathed his sword fully. "Better a Tefel. The kings are simpler." A faint smile. "Come. There is half a city to calm and a whole one to feed." They left the sept to the bells and the smell of spent incense. Outside, night had surrendered at last to a pewter dawn. The rain had bruised the mud of the streets into soft clay. The first glimmer of color came from Tyrell Pavises being propped along the mud gate and fresh bread rising on merchant braziers. No Lannister banners flew. Only the occasional crimson rag clung to a broken lance, dripping dye like old blood into the gutters. Robb and Renly convened their commanders in what had once been Maegor's throne room, a long, cold gallery beneath the Red Keep, abandoned since the days of Jaehaerys, the Conciliator. The hearths were empty. Every breath left little ghosts. They spread fresh maps across a dragon-carved table, pushing aside war dust older than any man present. "The wildfire burned 3 leagues of riverfront," reported Mathis Rowan. "Stannis' flagship the Fury sank with all hands, but 30 of his galleys cut west, beached south of the Sweetwater. They march overland, maybe 2 days behind Tywin." Lord Randall tapped the parchment. "If Tywin strikes first, we meet him on open ground. His horse is hungry and tired. We have fresh fodder and short supply lines." Roose Bolton's pallid smile surfaced. "Unless he saddles west and rides around us, forcing us to break siege to save the grain fields of the Reach. One does not bait a lion in his own den, one starves him." Sir Loras scoffed. "Starve Tywin, and Stannis will butcher what's left." Beric Dondarrion recalled to Renly's banners from scattered guerrilla raids. leaned on a soot-darkened spear. Stannis' strength is broken for now. He'll dig in on the Blackwater's south bank, build siege works, wait for the rain to cease. Renly scratched the stubble along his jaw. Then our choice is simple. Ride east and shatter Lord Tywin before he links with Dragonstow's embers. Or remain and seal the city, declare a new crown, and dare him to come. 9. Robb felt a dozen eyes swing his way. He had not asked for such weight, yet here it was. He let the silence stretch until even Bolton's composure became brittle. "We hold the city," he said at last. "The realm bleeds for every mile of mud churned by horse. Let Tywin come. This time, the walls are ours." Randall frowned. "You'll squander cavalry advantage." "I'll squander small folk if we march," Robb countered. "The Rose-Road is stripped, and the fields are marsh. Armies live on grain and faith. We have grain. Let us earn the faith." Renly's eyes glittered. Spoken like Aegon the Fourth's maester. Spoken like a son who watched famine follow war, Robb said. And tapped the inner circle drawn around the city. "We set levies to clean the storm drains, mend cisterns, quarter the wounded. We post bread prices and hang the first baker who cheats them. And we send ravens to every keep from Dorne to the Neck. King's Landing is open under new rule. Justice sits the Iron Throne." "Nada, Signor." "You mean me," Renly said softly. Robb inclined his head. "I do. And yourself? You're north?" "I remain king in the north, until peace binds two crowns better than war can break them. But while any southern tongue calls you traitor, my sword stands at your side." Bolton's voice slithered. "And when the tongues fall silent," Robb glanced at him, "then the north will decide whether the pact holds. But that day is not this day." Renly laid a hand on the river-battered map. "Datumo." "So be it. We hold." His voice grew firmer. "Sir Garland, command the city watch until we can cull the Lannister spies. Lord Rowan, take inventory of the granaries. Lord Bolton, you have charge of the dungeons. See that no prisoner starves or escapes. Lord Tarley, ride half your strength west to hedge Tywin's approach but offer no battle without word. Lord Dondarrion, shadow Stannis, keep him honest." His gaze found Robb again. "And you, I tend to the wounded." "Northmen and South," Robb said. "It will buy us more allies than gold." Council dispersed. Only when the last footfall died did Renly exhale a shaky breath. He had held too long. He leaned against the cold wall. "I feel as though I have tumbled headfirst into a whirlpool, and you insist the water is shallow." "Shallow, no," Robb said. "But the current is slow if we know where to plant our feet." Renly laughed, the sound brittle but warming. "We will see." The next 3 days passed in a blur of small labors that felt larger than battles. Robb strode the market squares in the gray dawns, cloak pinned with a plain iron brooch, gray wind at his heels. He halted quarrels over bread weight, over salted herring, over which sigil might hang from a street post. He ordered Tyrell cooks to boil pails of onion broth for the slum-sick beds. He helped a skinny girl fish her drowned dog from a storm channel. 3 streets later, she and half a dozen other children trailed him like ducklings, fearful yet curious. He found Sir Domeric Bolton in the Street of Flower, supervising the tally of seized stocks. The young man's smile was pleasant, his voice courteous. Nothing about him betrayed the shadow rumored to cling to Dreadfort blood. Yet when Robb mentioned the narrow ban on flaying passed by old King Aegon, the faintest flicker darted across his pale eyes. Humor? Contempt? He could not tell. On the 5th dawn, Edmure Tully's outriders galloped through the Lion Gate bearing news. Tywin had encamped by Bitterbridge, nursing a ragged army too weak to advance, but too stubborn to retreat. Stannis camped 10 miles south of him, out of arrow shot yet within sight. 2 kings glowering across muddy meadows, while their scouts skirmished over cow pastures and half-flooded ditches. Renly bade life to proceed in the lull. Tournaments sprouted like spring mushrooms in the outer yards of the Red Keep. Nothing grand. Only friendly tilts and melee to keep knights sharp and small folk cheering. Robb declined the joust but entered each melee, fighting with a blunted greatsword. He bruised half his ribs beneath Randall Tarley's charge, and split the lip of Willas Tyrell, who watched from a palanquin on the sideline, laughing despite the pain. That afternoon Willis asked leave to speak in the Maiden Vault Gardens. The air beneath the trellised roses was fragrant, sweet rain having coaxed late blooms. The Tyrell heir sat in a wheeled chair of pale ash wood. A palfrey cropped grass beyond the arbor, reins looped to a post. His lame leg lay propped on cushions, but his hands were strong and square. When my sister suggested a northern match, I thought it folly, Willis said. I have little to offer a warrior king. I'm no longer sure I want to be a warrior, Robb confessed. He watched a bee drift between blossoms. And my north needs harvest more than heroics. Willis studied him, hazel eyes calm. Trade then. Grain and apples for furs and fish. I have designs for new windmills that can thresh tenfold what the field hands manage. With river beacons, we could keep the Mander route open, even in winter fog. A partnership, if not yet a union. That's Taiwan. Robb smiled. It begins that way. We share seed, see what sprouts. Willis held out his hand. Robb clasped it, and in that simple grip Robb sensed a future. Quiet, durable, a furrow in the stony ground of war that might yet bear grain. The lull could not last. On the 14th night, word tore into the throne room like a black whirlwind. Tywin had broken camp. Bolton scouts raced ahead of the city ravens, breath steaming, horses trembling. The old lion meant to ride straight for King's Landing, forcing battle before Stannis could mend sails, or daring Stannis to strike Tyrell holdings undefended. Renly wasted no breath. Horns clamored. Banners snapped up lamplit streets. 3 hours after the word, half the allied host filed out the Antlers Gate beneath a harvest moon. Robb rode among them, his armor newly oiled, ice-etched pauldrons catching silver light. Catelyn kissed his brow before he mounted, and her eyes asked 1,000 questions none could answer in war's vacuum. Rickon squirmed under Sir Wendell Manderly's huge gauntlet, begging to ride, but Robb shook his head. The boy's pout burned hotter than any hearth. Shaggy Dog howled as the army vanished down the ribbon of dusty road. But the garrison keened back, a promise that not all wolves had left the den. They rode hard through the night, moonlight frothing on helms, hoofbeats shaking acorns from the roadside oaks. Dawn's first pink smudge showed them the banners of Stannis Baratheon rising like smoke gulls over the fields south of Bitterbridge. Tywin's scarlet streamers glistened barely a half-league beyond, two hammerheads poised to crush one another's skull while the world watched. Renly reined in atop a low ridge studded with gorse. His breath fogged the cool morning. If we charge Tywin, Stannis takes our flank. If we charge Stannis, Tywin cuts us apart. We must break their hate. Robb scanned the field. A ribbon of withered barley cut between the two armies, a natural no-man's land. In its center, an abandoned shepherd's hut leaned, roof collapsed. Parley, Robb said. Randall Tarley balked. They'll flay your tongue. Bolton's voice rasped. Some tongues deserve it. Robb ignored them. Renly, summon Stannis in voice to the hut at midday. Send my sword as pledge. I will go. Renly stared. Alone? Take Bolton's flayers with me if you doubt the day, Robb said, knowing full well Bolton's men slit throats quicker than they answered questions. Stannis respects courage and law. Tywin respects cunning at the cost of courage. They both respect necessity. Nenarchak. The Storm King wiped rain from his beard. I dislike it. Do you dislike breathing? Because if we fight both, we stop breathing. In the end, Tywin agreed first, whether from pride or curiosity. Stannis let a long half-hour pass before his reply came, stamped with the fiery heart and stag. At noon, Robb dismounted outside the sagging hut, cloak flapping in a sudden wind. Gray wind prowled one cautious circle, nostrils flaring. Tywin Lannister entered, followed by two gold-clad household knights. He wore plain chainmail under a crimson surcoat, no jewels save the lion's head pommel of his sword. The man smelled of saddle soap and cold steel, not a whiff of perfume or wine. Across the barley Stannis approached with only his maester and lanky Sir Richard Horp Dot. His jaw pulsed, lips drawn thin, as if every step tasted of bile. Robb stepped inside the ruin first. Gray wind lay across the threshold like a living bar. The roof sagged but held, a single crooked rafter defying time. Sunlight slatted through holes, dust motes circling. One battered stool and a sawn log offered seats. Tywin sniffed. "We meet in a sty." "A neutral sty," Robb said. "No one argues over pigs." Stannis ignored the quip. He closed the door behind him, though sheep's sorrels had eaten the lower planks. "Speak," he said. Robb met his heavy gaze. "You know the city has fallen." Tywin's mouth barely twitched. "To 2 rebel kings and a pup. Joffrey sails to Dragonstone," Robb continued. "He will submit to Stannis' judgment. Cersei is confined. The High Septon will preside over inquiry into the incest claim. If you move against us, Lord Tywin, you fight truth." "Nah. The truth is written by victors," Tywin said. "Then come read it before the ink dries," Robb offered. "Bring your banners inside the walls. Renly will not pillage Lannisport if you lay down sword. Nor will I." Stannis cut in. "The boy is mine by rightful succession." "He is," Robb agreed. "And when the High Septon pronounces, we surrender him to you. But not before, else the realm smells vengeance, not judgment." Tywin's pale green eyes flicked sideways. "What of my daughter? Alive under guard. She writes no scroll without a Septon's seal. She will face charges of murder if the trial reveals her hand in Ned Stark's death." "No." Silence. Sun motes floated between them like lazy sparks refusing to burn. "Stark blood is ever honorable," Tywin said at last. "Too honorable." Robb inclined his head. "You killed my father's honor once. It did not devour him. It made him legend." Stannis crossed his arms. "You offer a place for lions and leopards, but where sits the king who won the realm at Robert's side?" "On the Iron Throne after trial," Robb answered, surprising them. "Renly will abdicate if the gods and the laws and the lords of the realm seat you. But the trial must be public, witnessed by all 7 kingdoms. And you, Lord Stannis, must pledge an amnesty wider than your wrath." Stannis' cracked lips warred with themselves, wanting to sneer yet forced away. "You presume much." "I presume survival," Robb said. "For everyone. Even kings tire of pyres." Tywin's knuckles whitened on his sword hilt. Yet behind the iron front, something shifted. A calculation, a grim acceptance that the field offered no clean strike. "What of the North?" he asked. "The North is free to decide its fealty when winter ends. I hold no coin from the South today, but I will not war the Dragonstone king so long as law holds his scepter." Stannis looked from boy to lion and back. "I will consider demands penned, not spoken." Robb drew a parchment from his belt. 2 columns, neat, ink. "Already done." He handed it over. Tywin scanned the lines, eyes flicking. At the bottom waited 3 signature spaces. One for Renly Baratheon, one for Stannis Baratheon, one for Tywin Lannister. Robb's own name appeared only as witness. When he finished, he looked at Robb with something like reluctant admiration. "You bargained us into one corner of the board, Stark. Perhaps you do play taffel." He did not sign. Yet. Instead, he tucked the parchment into his belt. Without another word, he turned and stalked out into barley, nights trailing. Stannis lingered an instant, jaw working. "Boy's blood is mine," he said. Not quite a threat. "Win the trial," Robb answered, "and the 7 will hand him to you alive." Grey Wind's ears twitched as Stannis left. When the door side shut once more, the direwolf rose, nosing Robb's gauntlet. The boy rested his forehead against the animal's skull, sudden exhaustion washing through him. He had stood between 2 storms, and neither had broken upon him. Yet. The ride back felt longer, though the sun had scarcely moved. Banners drooped in the midday heat. Sweat glued mailed shirts to skin. Thirst made tempers spark. Yet the armies held their lines, no swords drawn. By dusk ravens passed overhead in fleets, Tywin's to Casterly Rock, Stannis to Dragonstone, Renly's to Old Town and Highgarden. The uneasy truce took shape like ice trying to set beneath warm water, thin, full of fractures. Robb spent that night outside Bitterbridge, sleeping little under the red canvas of a northern command tent. Ghosts of memory paced his thoughts. Ned staking Robert's heart's road, Catelyn singing lullabies by firelight, Theon's laughter echoing over the white knife, Jean Westerling's hands trembling as she unbound his first wound. He wondered whether she still waited in River Run, or whether rumor of a reach match had splintered her faith. At dawn, Lady Mage Mormont delivered news that stiffened him straighter than frosted mail. A Frey envoy had arrived in King's Landing bearing Walder Frey's formal protest. The old lord of the crossing claimed Robb had spurned his promise to wed a Frey girl and thus insulted the twins. Robb rubbed grit from his eyes. "I made no betrothal." Mage snorted. "Frey here's what feeds his purse." Renly read the letter at breakfast, shaking his head over boiled eggs. "Best send forthwith a letter of courtesy. Promise him a guest gift. Keep him sweet." Then, Robb knew courtesy would not quiet the crossing's hunger. Yet there was no space now to shore every dike against rumor, one river at a time. Back in the capital, life settled into a strange twilight peace. The Iron Throne stood draped in green and crimson cloths. Renly's lords swore they would not bare its blades until lawful judgment named the king. The small council reformed with unlikely members. Brienne of Tarth as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard pro tem, Roose Bolton as Master of Laws, Willis Tyrell placed over coin until the healers said his leg could travel, Lady Catelyn as Mistress of Ships. The fleets were shards, but she accepted the weight as if it were anchor and sail together. Robb declined a seat, choosing instead to command the city watch with Sir Garland. He walked every wall at dawn, at dusk, as midnight touched the gutters with cold damp. He learned the names of fishmongers and washerwomen, of armorers who forged cheap blades for flea-bottomed sellswords, of ragpickers who knew which Lannister bravos still lurked. At night he laid his cloak across straw pallets in the alleys, so old men could sleep dry one more dream. One evening he found Rickon sitting on the roof of the Gate of the Gods, legs dangling 20 cubits above the cobbles. Shaggydog sprawled beside him, chin on paws, eyes following every torch far below. "You promised Maester Vyman you'd stay within the yard," Robb said, climbing up a narrow stairway and settling beside the boy. Rickon shrugged. "I can see Mother's campfire from here." He pointed north where the garrison tents ringed a dry well. Tiny sparks indeed flickered. "And I can see the city's fires." Robb rested his hands on cool stone. "What do you see?" "Hungry people," Rickon answered without hesitation. "More than we have bread. And men who hate each other even when the gates are shut." "The bread we can mend," Robb said. "The hate takes longer." Rickon scratched Shaggydog's ears. "You can't cut it out like a splinter." "Sometimes I fear it's a limb, not a splinter," Robb admitted. Rickon stared at him, solemn as any maester. "Then you cut the limb before the rot reaches the heart." Robb felt something cold coil in his gut, part fear, part pride. He hugged the boy tight. "Pray, it doesn't come to that." The wind tugged their hair. Far below, a wagon squealed. Somewhere across the rooftops, a drunk sang about the reign of King Joffrey in bawdy doggerel, already 2 verses out of date. Rickon laid his head against Robb's arm, and for a moment, the city seemed a trove of sleeping lions, peaceful only because the wolves kept watch. The trial opened 3 weeks after the Bitterbridge Pact. A temporary gallery of tiered benches was built in the tourney field outside the Dragon Pit, individual canopies shading each lordly faction. The High Septon sat on a dais flanked by archives of Septons copying every word. Renly stood to one side, bareheaded, Stannis to the other, jaw set like rock. Tywin occupied a gilded litter draped in crimson, face unreadable. Robb watched from behind Catelyn, hands clasped, sword left deliberately sheathed. Cersei was led forth first. Her gown was sober gray, her hair knotted tight. She spoke calmly, denying every charge, blaming Stannis for forgery, Ned Stark for treason, Varys for manipulation. She cited Robert's neglect, Jaime's reputed gallantry, Joffrey's beauty and courage. The High Septon listened, unmoved. Witnesses came. Pycelle, shaking, Lord Moonboy, weeping, Sir Adam Marbrand, stoic Margaery Tyrell, cool as a winter rose, recounting the kiss Cersei gave her brother Loras the night Robert died. Then came Sir Jaime Lannister himself, delivered under white flag from River Run where he had languished. Shackled yet bright of eye, He shrugged at every question until the High Septon asked whether he fathered the Queen's children. A silence deep enough to hear gulls over the Blackwater filled the field. Jaime's lips coaxed a smirk. "They are golden, aren't they?" The gasp rippled like wind through grass. Cersei's cry pierced the morning. "Monster." Jaime closed his eyes. Not the answer a queen wants, but the truth no king dare deny. Cersei's strength broke. Guards caught her as she sagged. The trial paused while Septus fanned her with lily fans. Jaime was escorted away. Duty's done. The High Septon declared the charges proven. Incest, high treason, murder of the hand. Yet he called for mercy on account of the innocent, Tommen and Myrcella, who had been tenderly fetched from Casterly Rock in the lull. Tommen sat on a cushion near Renly, quiet tears on plump cheeks. Myrcella clung to Margaery's hand, whispering sisterly secrets. Stannis stepped forward. "Mercy is the chain that binds future treason," he intoned. "But children are not their fathers." He knelt before the dais. "Let the boy Tommen serve as squire to the crown until his majority. Let the girl be fostered at Highgarden under eyes who will teach honor." It was Tywin's turn to tremble. The old lion rose despite the hush, something like agony under his armor plates. Yet he spoke no protest, only lowered his head, acknowledging defeat in the only battle he could never win, time. Cersei was condemned to take the black. She laughed at that, wild and raw, as if the wall were but another palace awaiting her. The King's Guard escorted her south to the harbor, there to board a black-hulled cog bound for Eastwatch. Joffrey was condemned too, but he spat, tried to bite the guard's ear. He would be kept at Dragonstone until he came of age, then choose Black or the headsman. When the judgments were read, the gallery erupted. Some cheers, some groans thick with fear of change. Robb watched Stannis' shoulders loosen by a hair's breadth. Renly bowed his head, accepting the god's verdict even though it stripped him of his bid. Yet before the High Septon could dismiss the assembly, Willis Tyrell wheeled forward. "My lords," his voice rang clear, "the realm owes thanks to the North for peace." He gestured to Robb. "Let us recognize King Robb Stark, protector of the Trident, warden of the North, and first ally in this new age." Robb felt warmth flood his cheeks. He had not sought crowns today. But murmurs rose, Tully lords, Malisters, even some Stormlanders. Only Bolton's men watched, faces blank. Renly stepped to Robb's side. "I add my voice," he said. "The North bent the knee once to spare blood. It has bought our peace with its own. Let it stand free." Stannis' expression froze. Tywin's mouth twitched. The High Septon hesitated, quill hovering. Robb raised his hand. "No." Silence crashed again. "I will not claim independence today," he said. "The North remembers its oaths, even if the oaths were broken by others. Let the realm heal first. When spring returns, we will meet at Harrenhal, under charter, and debate the matter. Until then, I hold my title in trust." The gasp this time carried wonder and uncertainty both. Stannis inclined his head a fraction. The grudging nod of a man forced to respect what he could not dominate. Tywin's gaze sharpened on Robb, appraising anew. The High Septon set quill to parchment at last, recording every word. That night lanterns floated down the Blackwater like a necklace of fireflies. Each bore a paper slip with the name of a fallen soldier. Lannister, Tyrell, Stark, Stormlander. Small folk lined the banks, whispering prayers. Robb stood with Catelyn and Rickon on a promontory near the Red Keep's river gate. The water sparked, shimmering mirrors of lost faces. Catelyn's fingers brushed Robb's. "So much unshed sorrow. So many tomorrows to earn," he replied. A breeze fluttered paper wings. One lantern tilted, almost sank, then righted, continuing its silent voyage toward the sea. Rickon asked, "Will the sea keep them safe?" Catelyn knelt, smoothing his hair. "The sea keeps secrets better than men." Rickon nodded. "Serious. Then father is safe." Robb's heart twisted. He crouched, drawing the boy into an embrace. Across the dark water, bells tolled, not for alarm, but for the day of pardon the High Septon had declared. Amnesties would be granted for lesser crimes, bread handed free in every market, healing salves brewed by Tyrell leeches, for any who queued at the sept doors. But behind the bright lanterns Robb glimpsed darker shadows. Bolton's pale banners still fluttered on the Tower of the Hand. Frey ravens still whispered grievances, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the krakens of Pike sniffed opportunity, while a lioness plotted vengeance in a cell bound north. Peace, Robb knew, was a seed fragile as dandelion fluff. To root, it needed soil, water, watchful hands, and luck enough that no boot stepped on its tender shoot. Renly found him later on the gatehouse parapet. The Storm King wore simple blue wool, only a gilded stag pin marking status. He leaned beside Robb, both men silent for long breaths. "At dawn I sail to Storm's End," Renly said at last. "The realm needs roads mended, ports dredged. A small council that does not plot murder over supper. And banners true." Robb nodded. "I will ride north tomorrow. Harvest calls. And a talking pact with Walder Frey." Renly chuckled. "We face undertakers both." They shook hands, a clasp that felt more oath than farewell. "If spring sees us alive," Renly said, "bring your sister. We will feast." Robb promised, though he wondered whether Arya still lived. A wolf uncollared in a war-torn countryside. The march home took weeks. The King's Road lay rutted, bridges charred in retreat. Yet every village brought offers of eggs, of rough cider, even of song. The small folk had learned a dire wolf banner could mean bread instead of rapine. With each league, Robb felt weight ease. Yet not vanish. Near Maidenpool, a raven found him. Walder Frey agreed to treat under guest right at the Twins. Relief flooded him. Yet another parchment rode the same bird. Lord Roose Bolton invited King Robb to stop at Harrenhal for winter's first court. The words were courteous, the seal proper, but something in the phrasing chilled him worse than the rising winds. He pushed on, refusing the detour. Snowflakes began to nip at the riders' cloaks as they crossed the neck. Howland Reed's crannogmen emerged like spirits from mist, guiding the host through safe causeways free of bog iron traps. They spoke of Greywater Watch's dreamers foreseeing thaw after a long freeze, and half-seen crows the size of ponies. At Moat Cailin, the banners of House Frey awaited. Sir Hostine, Sir Aenys, young little Walder. They bowed stiffly, announcing that Lord Walder had taken a new bride barely 15, and would be delighted to see his grace soon, assuming no further insult occurred. Robb thanked them with measured courtesy, gave them bread and salt, and sent them north to Winterfell in advance. Winterfell's towers greeted him beneath pale winter sun. The stones rhymed white, smoke pluming from every vent in welcome. The deerwolves howled together on the ridge, Grey Wind leading Shaggy Dog, their voices braiding with the memory of summer and Lady long gone. The great oaken gates swung wide. Bran and Sansa stood waiting beside Roderick Castle. Behind them gathered small folk, stable hands, crofters, every face he had left months and lifetimes ago. Robb dismounted. Bran wheeled his chair forward, eyes bright. Robb dropped to one knee and embraced him. Sansa held back tears until she could kiss his cheek. Then she wept openly, and the yard around them blurred. Even Roderick's whiskers shook with emotion. That night, the great hall blazed with 40 hearths. They feasted on baked trout, on oat bread sweetened with honey, on venison stew thick with barley. Mira Reed sat near Bran, telling of neck ghosts. Rickon fell asleep beside the hearth. Shaggy Dog curled around him. Robb listened to music of reed pipes and hollow drums, and felt for the first time that the road of war might truly end, for a season, at least, in laughter. When the fire had sunk to embers and the hall emptied, he climbed the stairs to his father's solar. Catelyn waited there, holding a letter. Her face was pale. "It's from Roose," she said before he could speak. The words arrived by silent sister. He broke the seal. One line in Bolton's meticulous script. "The flayed man hungers yet." Behind the words lay darkness thick as the heart of the Wolf River. Robb folded the parchment. "Bolton means to betray." Catelyn's eyes shimmered. "Then we must answer before he strikes." Robb looked out the narrow arrow slit at the snow drifting across the bailey. Somewhere beyond these walls, spring perhaps waited. But here, winter carved its runes deep. He set the parchment in the hearth. The flames licked it, curling edges inward like black petals. He felt resolve crystallize hard as new ice. "We will call the banners," he said softly. "Quietly, and for the last time if the gods are kind." Caitlin touched his arm. "The realm rests on threads, and wolves run the loom," Robb answered. Far below in the godswood the heart trees' red leaves whispered against one another, though no wind blew, as if the old gods themselves shared counsel. Robb Stark listened, and in the steady beat of his heart, he heard both the roar of battles past and the faint, fragile promise of a dawn not yet written. He turned from the window and began to write letters, one to Willis Tyrell, speaking of trade and windmills, one to Renly, inviting him north for the thaw, one to Stannis, requesting a charter for Harrenhal come spring, and at last one to every northern clan, calling them to secret vigil beneath Winterfell's walls. The quill scratched. Snow fell. Tap. And somewhere in distant cell or gilded hall, the enemies of peace counted their knives. But for this night the north held, the heart tree watched, and a young king wrote futures in ink, bought dearly with his father's blood and his own scarred honor. When the last letter was sealed, Robb rested his forehead on the cool desk. Outside, a lone wolf howled. Another answered. Then silence blossomed like frost across all the windows of Winterfell, and the night closed around the castle, like a cloak. Heavy cold, but stitched now with a thread of hope no dagger could unpick. Okay. The flicker of the candle was so slight that Robb thought at first it was only wind, sneaking between the shutters of his father's solar. But the flame leaned once more, sharper this time, tugged toward the northern wall as if the old stone itself inhaled. Gray Wind felt it too. The direwolf uncoiled from the bearskin rug, hackles lifting, lips parting around the faintest growl. Robb laid one hand upon the creature's ruff to still him, then closed his fingers around the hilt of the dagger sheathed beside the inkstand. He did not rise, but he listened, beyond the rush of his own pulse, beyond the hush of empty corridors. The door latch whispered. No knock, no herald. Only the subtle click and the drunk sway of hinges rarely oiled. A shadow squeezed through, slight and swift. Robb held the dagger flat against his thigh and said nothing. Gray Wind's growl sank into a warning rumble, deep enough that the floor trembled. The intruder froze. A hood fell back. Arya's narrow face emerged, half lit by the candle, all hard angles and wild dark hair that had grown past her shoulders. The brown eyes that met his were older than her winters. He let the dagger fall to the desk with a soft clack and rose at once, arms open. She hesitated only a heartbeat before she launched across the gap, colliding with him so fiercely his chair scraped back. Her breath came ragged against his collar, between half-formed curses and half-formed sobs. Gray Wind circled once, sniffed her boots, then bumped her hip in greeting before settling again. How? Robb managed when the torrent eased enough that words could swim. Tumble down tower in the hollows, she said, voice raw. The hound was taking me to River Run for ransom when Frey seized the ford. I ran. Met Thoros, Lady Stoneheart, half a dozen ghosts. Got clear. Found out you were still fighting and not. She swallowed whatever memory knifed her. So I came. Footpads, fishing boats, anything with wheels. Took coin off worse than beggars. Didn't write. Didn't dare. Lunitentaster. Robb felt the fierce gratitude lodge behind his sternum like a hot coal. He remembered a girl chasing cats through Red Keep basements, grimacing at needlework. Now she wore breeches patched with sailor canvas, a little dirk at her belt, a leather jerkin stained by months of weather. You're safe, he whispered. For now. Her shoulders stayed tight, as though safety were no more than a rippled trick of light on dark water. He led her to the hearth, threw on birch from the stacked bin. While flames climbed, she knelt to greet Gray Wind properly, nose to nose. The direwolf breathed her scent, road dust, horse sweat, river mud, and a bitter underneath he could not name. and then licked her chin. She smiled, quick as lightning, gone as quick. "That one's grown," she said. "Shaggy dog too, and some are gone. And lady?" The name shivered between them. She pulled knees to chest and watched the birch catch. "Everywhere I went, I heard you'd taken the city and let Queen Cersei live. Some called you fool. Some called you saint. Cersei's no safer than any wolf among crows," Robb answered. "But the cells of Castle Black collar her anger, not mine. The realm needed justice, more than blood." "Damn Montel." Arya eyed him sidewise. "Justice is fragile as ice. Heat comes, it melts." He could not deny it. Bolton's parchment lay ashes, but the intent behind it had not burned. He poured steaming leaf water from the kettle Maester Lewin had left, added 2 spoonfuls of honey. Arya drank greedily. "Does Sansa know you're here?" "Not yet. She's sewing banners in the East Solar with Septa Mordain, sewing calm. Needle is quieter than war." A thin smile. "I'll fetch her at dawn. She fears every raven." "And?" Robb reached to smooth her hair and she allowed it, though long months had taught her to flinch from touch. The anthem of wind outside thickened, carrying the hiss of early snow. Winter came with night now, even before the calendar declared it proper. He found himself telling her of the trial on the tourney field, of Jaime's smile and Tywin's silence. She listened, eyes bright, chewing a dry crust she pulled from her jerkin pocket. When he spoke of his promise to decide northern fealty come spring, she frowned. "You think spring will wait for a council? Clouds don't care for parchment." "No." "I care," he said. Arya's gaze wandered to the blackened grate where ashes of Bolton's letter still smoldered. "Some men trade parchment for skin. You know that." "I know." He squeezed her shoulder. "Stay, at least through winter. Bran needs you. Rickon worships your every daring." "And you?" she asked. "I need your eyes. Your truths. You see when walls begin to crack." Grey wind chuffed in agreement. Arya's answering sigh seemed older than hers, borrowed from ancient weirwoods. Morning broke pearled and hushed, snow smoothing the bailey into virgin parchment. From every roof slender icicles hung like sharp quills poised to write destiny. Robb found Sansa with Arya atop the rampart overlooking the godswood. They stood so close their cloaks touched, one wolf gray, one deep blue with silver thread. The sisters' heads bent together, murmuring of what he could not hear. When he approached, Sansa's eyes glistened, but she smiled. A gentle, defenseless thing he remembered from days before courts and kings had scoured her heart. Sansa curtsied out of habit. "Your grace." "Brother will do," he said, returning a bow half serious, half silly. She laughed, and the rampart guards hid smiles behind beards stiff with rime. They spoke softly of letters arriving by Raven, Willis Tyrell's design for windmills, Renly's promise of seeds, Stannis' terse note confirming the council at Harrenhal on the first full moon after thaw. Yet louder than any written word rang the silence from Dreadfort. Bolton had replied to no summons since his missive of hunger. A rider sent north to gather tidings came back arrow-shot, tongue removed. That noon the godswood filled with banners, not unfurled but bowed, heads cloaked. Glover, Mormont, Hornwood, Talhart. Each lord arrived with 2 sworn knights only, as Robb's summons required, no greater show of force. They marched under pretext of observing the castle's harvest tithe. Yet every man carried the oath of vigilance in his eyes. Robb met them beneath the red leaves of the heart tree. Snow dusted the crimson canopy like salt on raw meat, making the carved weirwood face seem to bleed fresh. Bran sat near the roots in his wicker chair, hands folded, summer's absence a wound no words could close. Yet his gaze, milky in lamplight these days, held clear purpose in winter's sun. Rickon stood behind him with Shaggy Dog on a taut leather lead, though who led whom was uncertain. Arya perched on a low limb overhead. Silent shade. Sansa lingered near Septon Chael, fingertips white on her cloak clasp. The lords knelt. Robb bade them rise quickly. Stone and snow would leach heat from bones faster than any Lannister blade. "My friends," he began, "the Trident carries our blood still, but the next river will run northwest. Roose Bolton waits in councils we have not seen. Walder Frey holds the twins with grievance inflamed. Yet south the lions lick wounds, the Stormlands lick wounds. The Stormlands plant grain, and Tyrell ships carry cloth to Gulltown. The realm heals. Lord Galbart Glover's beard bristled. Bolton whispers flames. I say we ride and answer now. Answer how? Asked Lady Maid Mormont, crossing thick arms. We strike unbidden, we prove his fear. The crown must call him first. Nancy Yao. Sir Helman Talhart nodded. Send a raven for parley. Robb drew a breath that misted. We sent. None returned. Whoever rules Dreadfort now wants silence more than speech. Bran lifted his chin. I dreamed of leeches nibbling a maiden's wrist. They drained her color until she was shadow. The leechkeeper smiled red. Silence swallowed wind. Robb stepped close and knelt, meeting his brother's foggy gaze. Do you know when? He asked. Bran shook his head. Snowflakes tangled in his hair. Dreams float. Time melts. Robb stood. Then we will not drift. Glover rides east with 100. Mormont north with 50. Talhart guards Moat Cailin. We will not unsheath first unless Dreadfort does. But we will stand ready. Quietly. If Bolton strikes, horns will sound from sea to Shadow Tower, and the ice itself will answer. Da. The lords bent heads again, though tension gripped each posture. The ancient face of the weirwood seemed to watch, bleeding sap that glazed crimson icicles down its bark. When the gathering dispersed, Robb lingered while the godswood emptied. Grey wind nosed the carved mouth, sniffing the sap. Bran whispered to the tree, words Robb could not catch. Catelyn appeared, cloak swirling. She folded grey wool around Bran's shoulders, then turned to Robb. Roose may bleed the land but never soil his hands. He will send another. Domric, Robb said. She nodded, lips tight. Or someone worse. Dark rumors stalk that line. Bastard boys fed elk hearts, silent girls who breed hounds. A gust rattled branches. Robb looked to Arya, still perched above. She peered through leaves at the courtyard beyond. Eyes narrowed. We'll guard each gate, he said. But the wall inside our hearts must hold first. 3 days later, the Morrigan courier arrived, glove dripping with sleet, to deliver a square of veined parchment heavy with red wax. Lord Walder Frey accepted the proposed date for guest right summit at the Twins. He would extend bread and salt to the king in the north, his queen, if such creature existed, and an escort of 200. No more, no less. A list of daughters accompanied, each annotated with virtues and dowries, like weights of cheese. Rosalind modest and musical, Fair Walda fertile, Ali stoic. Cybele learned, in walnut ink along the margin, a single note. I am an old man. I will not be mocked twice. Robb read it at supper, between spoonfuls of acorn soup. The hearth behind him snapped. Sparks jumped. Sansa, seated to his right, traced a pattern on the tabletop. Arya scowled openly. He threatens guest right? She hissed. No. Robb folded the letter. He reminds me it is sacred, and that I sullied promise by inaction. Rickon slammed his fist, splashing milk. Cut him in half. Feed him to Shaggy. Bran's voice was soft but clear. Guest right holds the north as mortar. Break it, all the walls fall. Mindy. Robb rubbed temples. He demands 200. I will take 150 and 50 singers. Every sword a heartbeat, every harp a blade hidden in plain sight. Catelyn's mouth tightened. You plan for betrayal by assuming a song can fend steel. I plan for trust, he said, but train for wolves. Arya rose. I go. Sansa caught her sleeve. You are no singer. I can sing. Arya flexed fingers, with pointy end. Robb shook his head. You stay guard, Bran. Shaggy Dog likes your voice. If the twins sour, Winterfell must stand. Now. The girl's nostrils flared, but she yanked free and stalked out. Sansa breathed relief and sorrow in one motion. 2 nights later they rode. Robb, Catelyn, Lord Umber, Lady Mormont, Hallis Mullen, 50 house guards in new lacquered leather, emblazoned with the direwolf, 20 maesters and septons, 8 cooks hauling casks of salt cod and honeyed oat cakes, gifts for the crossing towers. 50 mummers traveled as well, for Walder enjoyed fools capering. They followed the King's Road south, hooves crunching over snow already glazed into ice by passing merchant sledges. Across frosted meadows, the shivering sea glittered pewter. Bursts of wild barley stuck up like bones. Wind scoured tents each dusk, yet inside laughter sparked as minstrels rehearsed. Robb studied them. Quick hands, nimble feet, eyes that missed little. Men and women both, north and river mixed. Some small folk lifted from misery by coin. Others once squires turned to song after losing sword arms. But every one of them could draw a knife faster than a swallow's wing if Fleabag circled. The songs they practiced masked code. Verses that could change key when danger neared. Notes that would drop abruptly as silent warning. Halfway to the twins, a wildling woman appeared on the road gap. A toddler slung across fur-banded shoulders, raven feathers in her braids. Guards raised pikes, but she lifted empty hands. Spearwives fled the winds, she shouted. Ice spiders climbed the fist. Snow bears roar, aye. But what follows is colder. Let south doors open or freeze. Lord Umber snorted. Free folk spin bedsheet ghost tales for every road toll. The woman spat. Ghost never stopped breathing. She pointed at Robb's banner. Wolf King must hear. Dead things walk. Catelyn's blood chilled. She leaned close to Robb. John wrote once of such in Father's letters. Robb urged his horse forward. Gray wind patted ahead, nose sampling air. The woman stood her ground, eyes black as volcanic glass. What walks? He asked. Ones with eyes blue as frost-bitten sky, she said. Ones who wear men's skins but no life beneath. They break bones for music. They gather in the north valleys, and the horn of Joramun sounded faint 3 nights past. Nadar. Robb felt the hairs on his neck prickle. If it's true, Mance Rayder will send word. Rayder fights fools, she answered. But Cole does not care who calls king. He offered bread. She accepted, feeding her child. He offered safe passage to the wall's shadow. She shook her head. South men cage free folk, she said. We go riverside where boats outrun claws, maybe. She turned and vanished into birch stands with the silence of falling night snow. Robb relayed the tale in letters to the Night's Watch, to Stannis at Dragonstone, to Renly. Yet ink upon parchment felt fragile as spiderweb against the image her words painted, blue eyes burning behind dead flesh. The horn echoing in desolate passes. He pushed thought aside. Walder Frey first hour. Winter's true jaws later. Even under gray sky the twins loomed grand, 1 tower per riverbank, bridge of stone between like a spine. Flags hung limp, cross towers argent on field watery blue. No music, no trumpets. Silence as heavy as grain wagons clogging the approach. Robb's column halted at bowshot, banners furled. A single figure emerged atop the western barbican. Walder Frey swaddled in furs, cheeks sunken, eyes alive with cunning. He leaned upon a stick carved in likeness of twin maidens. Bread? Salt? Song, Robb called. Frey's laugh flitted across water. Bring your singers and your rats. But remember, mice that nibble the old cat's supper lose tails. Gates creaked. Robb crossed first, gray wind pacing. The bridge boards thrummed beneath hoofbeats. On the far side, hall servants offered wooden plates, brown bread still warm from ash ovens, a bowl of coarse salt. Robb broke bread, dipped, ate. Behind him each guard repeated the rite. Only then did the aged lord smile. Inside the air smelled of onion gravy, wet rushes, and the faint medicinal tang of poppy. Long tables radiated from a hearth big enough to roast an ox. 2 were turning already. Daughters assembled by the dozens. Tall, short, pretty, plain, each twitching like mares in a new paddock. The minstrels struck soft chords, a river lament. Walder wheezed into a carven chair. King in the North rides at last. I was beginning to think you'd grown roots in dung. Robb forced warmth. Roots hold walls. I've walls to mend. Frey gestured to girls. Pick one. Lord Paramount's wait not. Robb's gaze brushed the line, settled on a slight maiden at the rear, hair pale enough to seem silver in lamplight, eyes the hue of river slate. Roslyn, if memory served. She looked downward, hands clasped. Roslyn plays harp, Walder said. Alert to any pause. Though she weeps too easy. Weeping means a heart capable of heed, Robb replied. I'll heed hearts when peace holds. But this table is for bread, not betrothal. Mr. Pooh. Walder's scowl deepened valleys on his brow. Refuse twice. I delay twice. Robb leaned forward. Until fire falls to embers, no vow is safe. But you may name surety, coin, hostages, a seat on my spring council. Winterfell needs master builders to raise a new granary. Your third son Benfrey is said to study timbers. Frey blinked owl-like. He knows beams, he admitted. Worth his weight. Wood is weight when snow collapses roofs. Robb sipped ale. Send him north, earn silver and respect. The old man's tongue flicked over sparse teeth. Respect costs more than gold. Then I'll pay in gold too. Catelyn watched exchange like a cat between sparrows. One bold, one cunning. Walder's fingers drummed. Minstrels changed tune, plucking livelier chords. At dusk, they feasted on stewed hare sweet, with blackberry wine, spiced turnips, river pike. Walder toasted his new bride, a slow-eyed daughter of House Crakehall, scarcely older than Sansa Deati. She blushed on cue, poured ale with trembling hands. The third cup had scarcely emptied when horns sounded atop the east tower. One, then two. Silence rippled the benches. Robb stood, gray wind stiffening. A guard burst through, eyes wild. Riders, my lord. Dreadfort banners, 50 men. Walder's wheeze rattled. Uninvited. Robb's mind raced. 50 was parley, not assault. He signaled Hallis Mullen, swords sheathed but ready. Domeric Bolton entered moments later, mail gleaming black, cloak the palest pink, signet pin, shaped like a flayed man. He bowed with dancer grace. My lord father regrets delay. Horses bogged at Barrowfield Ford. He begs pardon and peace. He offered a scroll sealed with Bolton wax. Robb accepted. Roose is welcome at dawn. He studied Domeric, no visible blade beyond ceremonial dagger, yet eyes glinted like hidden ice. Feast with us meantime. Domeric's smile was precise. With pleasure. He took a place between Lady Mormont and a Frey maiden. Conversation resumed, though undercurrent trembled like harp string tuned too high. Domeric spoke politely, praising Frey archers, admiring Mormont's barebone clasp. His words left no mark, yet each seemed chosen. After midnight, while courtiers snored across trestles, Robb paced the ramparts with Catelyn and Grey Wind. Snow drifted thick, filling crenel gaps. River below gurgled black. Bolton arrives at dawn, Catelyn said. He'd not send sun ahead if he meant steel. Unless sun is steel, Robb muttered. He clenched frost from his beard. Guard shift double. No cups unsupervised. At second cockcrow, a soft scrape echoed behind a parapet stack. Grey Wind snarled, lunged. Robb spun sword half-drawn. A Frey kitchen girl shrieked as direwolf teeth clamped her arm. It dangled limp, a flash of steel glinting from her sleeve. The assassin's blade clattered, narrow as a stiletto, coated with something oily black. Hallis seized her, wrested a second vial from bodice. Under torch glare, she confessed. Hired by the Pale Lord to prick Robb's wine. 50 gold honors promised. Robb's stomach iced. He looked down to the river, where dawnlight barely inked the water. Roose Bolton approached, banners fluttering. The parley convened in the narrow bridge chamber, stone floor hoar-frosted. Walder Frey presided, flanked by Catelyn and 2 daughters wielding trays of salt bread. Roose Bolton arrived with only Domeric and a silent maester, bearing a cedar chest. Robb faced him. "Your Grace," Bolton murmured. His eyes, the color of raw winter sunset, betrayed nothing. "You sent poison in my cup." Bolton's brow creased. "Such wound to courtesy offends me. Name proof." Robb waved. Guards dragged the kitchen girl, arm bound. The assassin sobbed. Bolton's gaze flicked over her as one might inspect a dulled quill. "I know her not." Catelyn held the vial. "Maester Vyman will swear it's venom. Let her tell again who hired her." "Nachimdena." The girl wept anew, repeating the Pale Lord description. Bolton's face remained grave marble. Robb spoke low. "Guest right forbids blood." Yet the attempt was blood enough. Roose touched finger to lips, feigning thought. A shrewd man would plant such snake to tarnish a rival. "Our friend Lord Frey loathes both of us at turn. Perhaps his grievance fed this seed." Walder's hiss split the air. "I feed no vipers in my hall." "Words prove nothing," Bolton continued, voice still as dead water. "But gesture might. I offer my son in hostage to Winterfell, to stand ransom for my faith." "Nuss." Domeric stiffened, but did not speak. The prisoner's face flashed anger, quickly masked. Robb exchanged glance with Catelyn. An unexpected gambit. Either Roose so confident of success he risked heir, or the heir's fate meant less than a single thrown knife. "Accepted," Robb said. "Domeric will ride north with me tomorrow." Bolton dipped head. "Then my honor stays whole." He turned on heel, left, cedar chest unopened. Walder slumped. "Though, Kingling, you gather hostages like acorns." "Acorns grow oaks," Robb answered. But his heart hammered. Battle avoided tonight, perhaps, yet a deadlier snare set. The return to Winterfell carved ruts in fresh snow. Domeric rode near front, silent, eyes scanning horizon. At night he played harp softly, fingers fluttering strings in patterns haunting and precise. Arya watched him from firelight shadows, suspicion coiling. Rickon watched too, shaggy dog growling low. Halfway, a blizzard struck. Wind screamed off the shivering sea, wiping tracks within heartbeats. Tents bowed, horses shivered. Robb's convoy huddled in a hollow beneath bent pines. Snow thickened to fists. That night, Domeric approached Robb's fire. "Your Grace," he said, handing back a raven scroll intercept from Bolton lines, apparently delivered by mistake to a Winterfell rider. Robb opened. Coded marks, but Bolton's sigil clear. Domeric's brow knit. "God, I warned father not to trust Celsail scribes," he said quietly. "Now you see we planned shipments of grain. Nothing more." Robb scanned cryptic rune sets. Could be grain tallies, could be troop counts. He folded it, meeting the young man's pale eyes. "Why tell me?" "Because I mean to honor hostage oath, however cursed." His voice cracked then. Faint hairline fracture. "I always thought father's ways cruel. Perhaps I hoped Winterfell could teach him otherwise." He plucked harp once, note trembling. "Perhaps I deceived myself." Robb studied him by fire glow. Snow hissed in flames. The boy looked weary, earnest. Yet a Bolton's blood ran twisty as Winter River. Robb decided only time would judge. Storm broke 2 days later. They reached Winterfell's gates just as sun set, wolves on ramparts giving welcome howl. Sansa led singers into hall, voices bright. Bran blinked tears to see Robb unscathed, Arya alive, Domeric at his side. That night around oaken tables they dined. Domeric at Bran's urging sketched poems onto parchment, lines about the weirwoods, whispering lost names. Sansa hummed melody, shaping verse to chime. For a breath, the great hall rang only with creation, no blade unsheathed. After children slept, Catelyn and Robb conferred with Maester Luwin in solar warmed by brass braziers. Domeric waited outside door, flanked by guards. On the desk lay Bolton's scroll decoded by Luwin. Not grain shipment, but columns of names. Karstarks, Ryswells, Dustins, each with numbers beside and slash mark. Luwin's quill circled footnote. First frost. Troop matrix, Robb said. Catelyn closed eyes. Roose means to march when first full freeze bridges the rivers, and we host his son. He expects you to kill Domeric, thus justifying blood feud, Lewin murmured. Robb exhaled. We will not. We will keep him alive, proof of our honor. Catelyn gripped his wrist. But if the boy is party to the plot, then he will show hand. Robb turned scroll. Our answer isn't murder, it's outmaneuver. He drafted letters through the night. To Lord Reed requesting swamp ambush points. To Great John for 2,000 spears to man Last River Ferry. To Willis Tyrell for shipments of barley to overland route, despite snow. To Stannis urging Night's Watch reinforcement. Each sealed with direwolf wax and sent with trusted ravens before dawn. Weeks passed in hush. Snow deepened. The lake where Ned once skated with his children froze thick enough to bear 4 horses abreast. Bran's chair runners carved smooth tracks down courtyard. Arya and Rickon widened them into racing lanes, cheering each other like wildlings. Domeric watched these contests from ramparts. Face unreadable. Sometimes he offered a quiet tip on balance. Sometimes he walked away mid-race, tension in shoulders. On the 15th night of deep winter, the moon vanished behind cloud, and the wolves howled until dawn. Robb woke chilled, sensed gray wind rigid beside bed. He dressed, sword-strapped, descended to yard. Catelyn met him beneath arch, lantern high-eyed. Something moves, she breathed. Scouts returned before noon. Bolton forces crossed White Knife by makeshift ice bridge. Furs masking sigils, numbers unknown but many. Fires seen near Barrowfield. Small folk flee. Robb ordered horns. He walked to Domeric's quarters himself. 2 guards flanked door. Inside, the boy stood by lattice window, harp in hand. Snow feathered his shoulders. He had not slept. He turned, eyes wet. You knew, Robb said. I feared, Domeric whispered. Father writes secrets in silence. When his raven spoke last, his words felt farewell. He held out a thin roll of vellum. Robb took it. Rue's hand. If the pup will not kneel, skin his claws. If claws remain, take heart that winter skins all. Robb's jaw clenched. He looked up. Where is he? East. He'll use the frozen ferry at Widow's Watch. 20 leagues through Wolfwood. 5,000, maybe 6. Calculation bloomed. His own garrison 4,000. Great John's reinforcements 3 days distant. Mormont still patrolling Stony Shore. Robb sheathed his sword. You'll ride with me, Domeric. If father sees you alive at my side, perhaps this ends bloodless. Domeric's throat bobbed. Or he'll kill me too. Then you cast the die on honor instead of fear. They marched that hour. Robb, Domeric, 200 mounted. Gray wind bounding ahead. Snow fell thin now, brittle flakes swirling. Cross wintry barrens their breath plumed. They found Bolton's vanguard 4 leagues out, torches dim in midday murk, flayed man banners half hidden by gray cloaks. Robb signaled halt, advanced alone with Domeric. The army parted to let him through, uncertain. At its heart sat Roose Bolton astride a white rouncey, pink cloak billowing. His face showed mild surprise, quickly shuddered. My king approaches unguarded. My vassal marches unbid, Robb answered. Bolton's gaze flicked to Domeric. Something behind his eyes thawed. Whether warmth or fury Robb could not tell. Son, Roose said. Father. Domeric's voice shook. He dismounted, stepped closer. You would spill Northman blood. No, Roose replied calmly. I would dress rotten flesh. The realm, south rots still. The north must sever, cauterize, reign in purity. We sever ourselves, Domeric cried. We become rot. Robb watched father and son orbit like twin moons caught in jealous gravity. Bolton's soldiers shifted, uncertain. Roose's tone hardened. You spout wolf words. Eyes to Robb. You turned him. I offered a mirror, Robb said. He chose reflection. Bolton exhaled frost. My host returns to Dreadfort. Murmurs surged among ranks. He raised gloved hand. But blood called must answer. Once thaw reveals fields, I summon northern moot. We decide there if Stark line commands still. Robb inclined head. On moot I agree. Ancient right. Ruzi's eyelids lowered. Ancient right's skin, false kings. He wheeled horse. The host turned, a river of gray and pink flowing northeast. Robb's relief was cold and heavy. He turned to Domeric. The boy sagged, tears freezing on lashes. You live, Robb said. For now. Domeric wiped cheek. But the moot? We'll let the people speak, Robb answered, though he knew speech shaped by fear could warp any truth. Still, he had bought weeks, maybe months. Enough perhaps to prove to every clan that life under Direwolf banner outshone dread. They rode back to Winterfell. Word of Bolton withdrawal preceded them. Hearth fires burned brighter. Yet Robb kept vigil. Each raven he sent south begged men with grain and empathy, not swords. Each morning he sparred with Arya until snow sprayed from practice yard like sparks from a forge. Bran watched, eyes distant, silent about latest dreams. Only once did he speak, voice slack as snowfall. Antler shadows fall over Harrenhal in spring. Robb noted it. Shadows. Antler. Suns. Renly. Dennis. Foreign kings across narrow sea? He wrote again to Renly, urging caution on journey north. Winter clenched harder. Wolves grew restless, seizing sheep even inside palisade. Food stores thinned quicker than counted. Sansa's windmill designs arrived from Willis, too late for frozen ground. Yet people endured, singing by dim tallow, sowing furs. In the deep hush before dawn one day, a horn bellowed thrice from East Watchtower. The cadence for riders approaching fast. Robb rushed to Wall Walk. Beyond Snowblind Flat rode a column. Crimson lions leading, yet bearing white banner of truce. At head rode Sir Kevan Lannister and a tall woman in silver-studded mantle. They halted within arrow range. Kevan raised visor. King Robb, I beg safe passage for Lady Myrcella of House Baratheon. Robb's chest tightened. He descended, opened gate. Inward trotted the party. Kevan solemn, Myrcella muffled in furs. She dismounted, curtsied. The city felt cage. Her voice trembled. Lord Regent Stannis releases me to North Ward until council. Safer than Dragonstone storms. Robb offered hand. You are welcome, princess. Rickon gaped. Arya rolled eyes but bowed. Sansa stepped forward, face soft. Myrcella nearly collapsed into her arms. Later, Catelyn read Stannis' parchment. The girl to reside at Winterfell, as pledge of goodwill, between crowns until Spring Council decides fate. Robb saw a masterstroke. Stannis offloads hostage risk, pushes north into protective corner, thwarts Lannister retrieval. But deeper still, Stannis trusted Robb, or sought to test him. Over weeks, Myrcella settled. She read to Bran, taught Rickon harp fingering, baked lemon cakes with Sansa that threatened to lighten gloom. Deerwolves sniffed her curiously. She giggled when gray wind sneezed flour across her skirts. Even Arya softened, sparring lightly with her in yard. Yet eyes of Winterfell smallfolk watched golden hair with mixture of awe and suspicion. Songs of Lannister treachery still hummed. Robb ordered extra guard on her chambers, not for fear of flight, but fear of zealot blades. The New Year's first full moon rose bruised purple behind thin clouds. Ravens flapped south as Robb prepared for journey to Harrenhal. He would travel by sled and horse when roads allowed, escort 500. The great lords Domeric as honored ward, Myrcella under pledge, Bran and Rickon staying behind with Maester Luwin, Sansa to come as diplomat. Arya insisted to ride disguised as page. Catelyn consented after long debate, citing her keener nose for deceit than half the men. Night before departure, Bran asked Robb to wheel him into Godswood. Snowbank high as his head hemmed the clearing. The heart tree's face seemed paler, eyes pools of dark blood. I saw you, Bran whispered. In dream I was wolf, I was snow, I was sky. I saw you at Harrenhal, talking to men made of shadow. Their antlers gone the wrong way. firefly lights dancing round towers. Nah! Robb knelt. Shadow men. Like kings, but empty. Bran shivered. I could feel cold come with them, even though torches burn. Robb smoothed his hair. Dreams worn. I'll watch for hollow kings. Before dawn he left Winterfell, gray wind trotting ahead. The column snaking east, then south, beneath churned sky. Behind, the castle's lights twinkled faint, and were gone. Spring seemed myth beyond far horizons, but he carried letters and promises, songs and fears, hostage and hope. He carried the North, its memory of oaths kept, its hunger for justice steady as polar star. Roads cracked under sled runners. Bolts of freezing rain cut faces. Yet each league brought new faces. Clansmen emerging to join escort, crofters waving rag banners. Some offered onions, some only blessing. All whispered of dead things stirring beyond the wall, rumors thick as smoke. Robb logged them in heart. At Queenscrown they found a Night's Watch raven pinned to post, wildlings harrying Eastwatch, giants seen. Jon Snow reported from Frostfangs. Fire needed, dragonglass precious. Robb stared long at the parchment. His half-brother's words shorter than space between snowflakes, yet weight beyond measure. He sent back sled with axes, tar barrels, message. Hold fast, the North remembers. As they neared the ruins of Harrenhal, the air changed. Smelled of damp stone and history's burned marrow. Black towers jagged like fingers scraped by dragon flames still rose, immense scars visible miles off. Camp sprawled around walls. Stormlord pavilions south. Tyrell Violet to west. Stannis disciplined rose east. Scattered Lannister tents flying hush gray of neutrality. In the center commandeered gardens were cleared for moot. A ring of wooden benches tiered. Dais of weathered oak for claimants. Robb's host established on north bank of God's Eye, each tent set arrow straight, banners subdued. He walked the perimeter with Glover and Lady Mormont, counting watch posts, mapping choke points between shattered towers. Gray wind sniffed rubble hissing underfoot. On the eve of moot, fires burned in braziers thrice man-height. Snow melted to slick mud. Lords arrived. Renly with Brienne, smiling but guarded. Stannis grim in black velvet. Tywin quiet as iron. Roose Bolton pale, his cloak dyed deeper pink than before. Frey envoys scattered, eyes everywhere. The High Septon mounted dais, voice echoing shattered shells. First petition, Tyrell request for restitution of gardens burned by Lannister siege. Second, Tarly's claim over stolen barley. Third, the fate of North, kingdom or vassal. Robb rose, cloak dusting wet boards. He spoke of fathers kneel to dragonfire to spare lives, of betrayal of that covenant, of healing now fragile. He asked council to grant North right of self-determination in 10 years, after winter passes and peace proves true. In return, North would pay token tribute, 5,000 stone of grain per annum, 200 barrels of cod, to keep bonds warm. He ended by swearing peace to every realm neighbor. Murmurs rippled. Some smiled. Stannis weighed. Tywin's lids half closed. Roose Bolton stood next. His voice poured like chilled oil. North atrophies under southern coin. Only severance now would salvage identity. He demanded immediate independence, with himself named Warden of North until Stark blood male heir matured. Subtle jab at Robb's unmarried state. Domeric flinched behind Robb. Argument erupted. Renly objected to instant decree. Freylord scoffed at delayed tribute. Tywin proposed impartial council of maesters to study, drawing jeers. Amid rising din, Arya, disguised as page, slipped onto dais. She tugged Robb's sleeve, whispered, "Spiders in Bolton tent." Robb's pulse spiked. He addressed masses. "Let us continue tomorrow, after rest and reflection." The High Septon seized chance, adjourned. Snow fell again by night. Robb dispatched silent guards with Arya guiding to Bolton lines. They stalked shadows between charred walls. From a slit, they spied Roose conferring with Tywin, cloak tips brushing. Tywin's words carried on wind. "Promise the neck and hall of White Knife if you strike tonight." Bolton's reply, I would flay the whole neck to reach Winterfell. But Stark blood thickens his shield. Yet claws may slip when hearts sleep. Dewanne. A shape shifted beside the men. A brave OZ assassin by the tilt of thin sword. Robb's stomach plunged. He withdrew undetected, raced back. He roused Sansa from lean-to, Myrcella from sealed tent, reinforced guard, set Grey Wind loose to stalk. Close to midnight, scream cut air. One of Robb's pickets found, throat slit near cistern. Grey Wind bolted into darkness. Robb drew sword, followed with Mormont and Tallheart. Snow swirled, tracks blurred. They found Bolton's assassin cornered by Direwolf inside broken stable. Thin man draped in night black, curved sword dripping. He lunged at Grey Wind. Beast evaded, fangs closing on arm. Man sliced, but Brienne, arriving seconds later, split skull like melon with longsword. Blood steamed on straw. Brienne wiped blade. Not Stormlander, she noted from foreign leathers. Morning moot resumed under tension, thrumming taut. Robb demanded justice. Assassin wearing black pearl earring of Bravos found in Bolton pay ledger. Roose raised brow. Forged. Domeric stepped forward. He'd copied ledger earlier by heart when father thought him dull. He recited entries. Payments to kindly man for orphan tasks. Gasps. Murmurs. Roose's eyes narrowed, but face stayed calm. Son's memory fails. Bran, brought by sled into assembly, lifted his head. Voice carried unnatural strength. I see leeches drinking maiden's wrist. The keeper is pale and smiling. Lords shivered. Superstitious dread crawled. Bolton's composure cracked, slight twitch. Tywin's gaze slid away, distancing. High Septon murmured with Septons. Verdict. Bolton to answer for attempted kinslaying before gods and men. Until cleared, stripped of titles, lands held in trust by Lady Mormont. Domeric remains ward. Roose's eyes glinted murder, but he bowed. Moot resumed. Vote tallied. North accepted Robb's 10-year pact by slim margin. Tyrell and Baratheon support tipping scale. Tywin abstained, face carved stone. Renly embraced Robb after Deus. You caged dread wolf without spilling blood. Not yet. Robb looked to Rue's boarding horse outside walls, cloak swirling like infected wound. But winter's long. Stannis approached, nodding once. True king or rebel, you keep oaths. Come spring you'll receive a shipment of dragonglass. For the wall. Robb's breath hitched. My thanks. Stannis' mouth almost smiled. Night gathers for all, even kings. Remember that. They left Harrenhal under slate sky. Snow turned to sleet. Myrcella rode between Arya and Sansa. Laughter timid yet genuine. Domeric kept to Robb's side. Silent, until Riverbank far behind. You saved me as hostage, he said. But I would stay as man of honor if you'll have me. Robb clasped forearm. Then serve as shield to my brother Bran. Learn from Maester Luwin. The North needs hearts that choose mercy. They pressed on. Raven from Night's Watch met them near Widow's Ford. Fist of the first men overrun, Lord Commander missing, dead walk. Robb read aloud to captains. Silence lay heavy. Sansa whispered prayer. Robb lifted face to iron sky. In that endless gray he felt threads knot. Lions, wolves, roses, flayed men, and blue-eyed shadows. 10 years might grant North its say, but 10 years were sand before storm if other sick things marched. He called halt, penned message to every lord of 7 kingdoms. Send dragonglass, send fire, send men willing to fight who cannot bleed. He affixed Direwolf's seal, gave ravens wings. Night when they reached Moat Cailin. Arya climbed Watchtower. Robb joined. Horizon shimmered aurora blue. Far, but coming. Blue eyes. She whispered. Not yet, he said. She turned. When they arrive, moot and throne and guest right won't matter. Then will matter, he answered. The living. Below, Grey Wind howled. Shaggy Dog answered. Summer's memory and Bran's green dreams. Nymeria somewhere south raising wild pack. The chorus braided across dark, raw, and defiant. Robb laid hand on the cold stone of the tower, feeling tremor of world turning. War for crowns dimmed, war for dawn lit edges of horizon. But he carried within him embers of nights by hearth, songs of sisters, prayers of brothers, threads of fragile alliances spun from mercy, not fear. Embers enough, he hoped, to kindle blaze against the longest night. Snowflakes swirled, ghosting across battlements. He closed eyes, saw Ned beside him, stern smile, heard Catelyn's lullaby drifting, tasted the bread and salt that bound all mortal kin. He opened them again, breathed frost-sharp air, and prepared to lead north into dusk that pressed from every compass point, trusting that somewhere beyond, on the other side of dark, waited a dawn they had not yet earned, but still believed could rise. K. The last lanterns of Moat Cailin guttered against the damp, and left the inner yard in a twilight that smelled of peat smoke and iron. Robb Stark reined in beneath the moss-slick arch, and felt the fort's ancient stones press a chill through cloak and mail. Where green water pooled round broken causeways, pale wisps of mist slithered like uneasy spirits. Gray wind trotted ahead, muzzle lifted, tasting what the wind carried down from the haunted north. Robb dismounted to rest a gloved palm on the gate's warped beam. It had stood here since the first men, a line of defense older than Andals and dragons, older even than the memory of kingship. Yet every grain of it felt new to him now, wetted with the same taut vigilance that ran inside his veins. He had left this gate as lordling. He returned as ruler burdened with vows heavier than the gate itself. His escort filed in behind, Glover axes and reed nets, Mormont spears blackened against frost. Sansa rode near the center ranks, hood drawn, cheeks flushed from brutal sea wind. Near her, Myrcella's golden braids glimmered like caught sunlight. Arya, still page in leather and wolf-gray squire's cloak, circled the column on a shaggy pony, restless eyes counting every loophole and murder hole above. And Domeric Bolton, solemn and ink-fingered, guided the baggage mules with a care too deliberate to be anything less than penance. The gate captain, a reed-thin Cranogman named Holt, bowed from the waist. Ravens skirl south to Winterfell moored. The last flew at dusk, 4 reach Eastwatch. 3 tassel black, 1 to Old Town by fast galley. All bear your seal. Good, Robb answered, and his breath silvered before his lips. Write a fresh message. Tell Maester Luwin the Moot has spoken, and the North's fate waits 10 winters of peace. Tell him as well to grind every shard of dragon glass in the vaults for arrowheads. Holt's quill hand trembled. Dragon glass? From the crypt forges? From every shelf. And if the tombsmiths object, have them walk outside the walls tonight and look north. Robb's gaze drifted to the wilderness of knotted pines beyond the neck, dark as pitch in the starless night. They'll see why. He passed the courtyard where men rubbed frost from bridles, where kettle drums thrummed low to guide wagons through broken slag deddy way. Across the marsh a single horn moaned, reed hunters returning with nets heavy, not with fish, but with fat white eels to salt for the castle's cellars. Their echoes slipped off into the cattails and were lost. Inside the commander's chamber, once a grim holdfast, now warmed by a peaty hearth, Robb rolled the newest maps onto a bench. Water stains freckled the vellum. Their world had begun to blur at the edges. Catelyn joined him moments later, cloak trailing chill. There are fresh sights from the wall, she said. A brother of the Watch staggered into Greyguard 2 nights ago. Said he fled South Tangle when blue shadows pulled the hearts out of his companions. He swore the hearts still beat in the snow until they turned black. Did the maesters judge him mad? Only frightened, and frostbitten to the elbow. Robb traced the parchment. It's one tale of 100, but even one truth is enough. Catelyn's eyes glistened in firelight. And yet, the lords contest tariffs while the dead rise in wastelands. They contest because they fear silence more than sound, he said. Give them a coin argument, they forget what lives beyond their hearth fires. She laid a hand on his arm. And you, what do you fear? Robb thought of his father's voice, of Bran's hidden dreams, of Arya's wild grief. He thought of Ned's face beneath Baelor's steps, still as marble. I fear doing too little too late. Outside, the yard erupted in shouts. Grey wind's bark cleaved the night. Robb reached the door at a run, Catelyn a step behind. A sentry pointed northward with a shaking spear. "Lights!" he cried. Blue lights on the edge of peat. Across the fens a string of ghost lamps floated, silent, maybe a league distant, pale cerulean sparks that glided just above the reeds. The guardsmen whispered of will-o'-wisps and drowned princes. But Robb felt cold burrow under his breastbone, deeper than mere winter. He had seen wildfires green and ghost fires of swamp gases. None burned this shade, this hungry sapphire that devoured darkness rather than banishing it. "Sound one horn," he ordered. "No more. One for rangers returning." He prayed it might yet be. Not two for enemies, not three for others. Not yet. The horn's single bellow faded across the still water. The lights bobbed once, then winked out as if swallowed whole by the night. Only wind answered. They resumed march at dawn. Ice sheathed every cattail, cracking as hooves broke channels through slush. South of the neck the King's Road climbed out of marsh to skirt highland barrows, laced with tombs older than first runes. Atop the tallest ridge stood the bones of an ancient watchtower, black against thorn-gray clouds. Arya reached it first. She climbed half-crumbled steps 2 at a time, boot soles slapping frost. From the summit she saw the sweep of white across the roof of the world, forest unbroken until horizon met sky, like a sea frozen mid-storm. And in that monstrous stillness, she glimpsed something else. Movement. Far out, pinprick small yet wrong, as if the snow itself shifted shape, rose in ranks, and laid itself flat again. Her breath caught. Wind needled her cheeks. She hurried down the spiral, words tangling with steam before they reached Robb's ear. He listened, hand brushing her shoulder, no scold in his eyes, only iron calm. They pressed on, doubling scouts. No fires by night. No songs. Even Shaggy Dog's rough yawp dwindled to wary whines. At White Harbor, they found the Manderleys mustered, steel half-skinned in salt rime, banners snapping blue and cream above half-rigged river galleys. Lord Wyman himself, vast and wheezing, met Robb at the Wolf's Den quay with a bannet of fresh river crabs and a ledger thicker than a maiden's waist. "Grain tallies," the fat lord puffed. "Enough rye and barley to feed all watch forts from the Shadow Tower to Eastwatch a full turn." Robb clasped the man's meaty forearm. "Make the transfers. Double the carts. The wall must eat before we do." Wyman's grin split like a new seaman butter. "Spoken like a Stark. My fisherfolk grumble, but they'll net pride when the dead things break." A pale dawn saw those barges glide north, crab pots replaced by burlap sacks. Robb watched from the pier until masts dwindled to sticks. The icy wind carried gull cries. Thin, forlorn. He wondered if gulls would feed on whites as gladly as they plucked fish guts. Back in the Lord Solar, Sansa conferred with scribe knots to seal agreements. White Harbor to sew boiled leather foul-weather coats, to shape whale ribs into bolt throwers, to seed 5 smiths to Castle Black. Myrcella helped tally cloth bolts, nimble quill racing alongside Sansa's. Their sisterly hush made Robb's heart ache with something like hope. Night fell with a freight of sleet that rattled shutters. Robb stood alone on the rookery balcony, reading Stannis' New Raven. Dragonstone forges had poured 500 obsidian arrowheads. But the smuggler fleet was pinned by storms off Massey's Hook. He closed his eyes and inhaled the sea's brine punch. Somewhere in that darkness Jon fought. Maybe bled, maybe froze. He whispered a vow to winds that could carry it where ravens failed. "Hold, brother." The march resumed along the coast road, now flanked by Manderley spears and a file of shield maidens from Bear Island. Lady Mage rode at their head, great axe across her saddlebow, bearing news. Sails off Sea Dragon Point. 3 black-on-green Kraken sigils. Robb's jaw tightened. Euron, or another Greyjoy. Victarion, Mage yesed, with 2 Reaver bands. Testing ice to see how deep wool drown. "Let them test," Robb said. But warn Torgan Square to flood the inlets with spiked booms. Snow deepened thigh-high drifts. The horses plodded, nostrils glazed white. The younger Mormon women lashed tees to their backs and took turns scouting over crusted powder. One dusk, they returned with 6 elk, and the story of fresh footprints bigger than bear paws, biped and heavy. Tyrion claimed giants once, Arya murmured when she heard. Giants walk, Robb answered. But they bleed too. The things that follow them do not. The teamster line slowed to a crawl. The watchers at wheel ruts reported pale shapes each night, once a doe with eyes like broken sapphires, standing unmoving in blizzard's roar, until dawn light cleft it to nothing. Once a ring of ravens perched on snowbank, their feathers rhymed, staring west in unison. No arrow loosed among them found flesh. They scattered, then reformed behind, as if stitched to the wind itself. On the 21st night from the twins, they reached the great weirwood of Lorne Watch. A monstrous trunk, gone half hollow, limbs still blood-red despite the sap's slow decline. Beneath its arch the old kings once held council in the Dawn Age. Bran's chair was drawn close, furs piled high. The boy insisted on the midnight vigil. "I must see," he said. He had not walked nor dreamed true since leaving Winterfell. Yet his eyes, clouded though they were, burned with queer light. When the dead pass, the tree will know. Robb relented, setting 6 guards inside the rotted bowl. Domeric took first watch, silent sword across knees. Arya perched in a lower branch, needle unsheathed. Sansa wrapped a wool shawl around Bran's thin shoulders and whispered stories of summer bees. The wind fell to nothing. Snowflakes drifted slow as motes in lamplight. A smell like cold stone seeped through every seam of mail. Gray wind prowled the line's edge, tail low, growled vibrating ground. The tree groaned, sap hissing where frost cracked it. Bran's eyes snapped wider. Whites rolled back until only pupil flickered. His breath billowed. 1, 2, and then he said a name that froze Robb's spine clean. Jon. The word floated, thin but clear. Bran's head lolled. Arya scrambled down. Sansa cried out. Catelyn lunged. Robb cupped Bran's face, felt heat dwindling. "What do you see?" He shook him gently. "What, Bran?" "Snow. Wide as world." Bran's lips cracked. "Ice rivers. Blue men. Horn of giants. Fire woman with red hair. Wolves. Many wolves." He sagged into Robb's arms. Maester Polt dashed forward, vial ready. But Bran's eyes fluttered open, calm and lucid. "They marched," he whispered. "Past the fist. Past Frostfangs. Jon lives, but the wall around his heart bleeds." Robb exhaled shakily. When Polt pronounced the boy only exhausted, Robb ordered the camp broken. No further vigil. They would run by daylight until they reached Winterfell again. The drawstone of every wolf's circle. Winterfell's fires burned day and night now, sending red plumes above white haze. The first refugees had arrived before Robb's host. Wildling mothers with babes wailing, crofter families whose barns lay flattened by unseen wings. Eastwatch sailors trudging hundreds of miles after ships foundered on frozen breakers. They huddled in the lower bailey, soot-streaked, hungry, eyes big with stories of whites in the mists. Robb entered through the hunter's gate. Horns boomed from battlements. Rickon tore down the steps, leaps spilling almost faster than Shaggy Dog. Arya vaulted after, hugging him so hard both nearly toppled. Bran's litter crossed the yard, Bear Island shield maidens clearing path. The crowd of small folk knelt as much in awe as deference. Robb climbed the stone dais before the great hall. Snow spun through torchlight. The banners of direwolf, kraken, merman, flayed man. All but Bolton's ripped away, rippled above. "Hear me," he called. His voice rolled, steady as Thaw River. "Some of you fled things you could not name. Some lost kin. Some lost hope. But you have not lost hearth. Winterfell stands, and as long as her hearts beat, so do yours." A murmur swept the yard. Fear unmet, meeting courage. Robb lifted Ice's brother blade overhead. "Tonight we mend walls. Tomorrow we ride, not for crowns, not for moot, but for dawn." Blade kissed firelight. "For the living." A roar broke that shook the ancient timbers. Even the direwolves answered. Gray wind, shaggy dog, distant Nymeria howling across the hills. In that chorus, something changed. Fear learned to sing. Spring's council had been set for Harrenhal, but spring rode a fickle steed. Snow still fell heavy even as the month of the maiden fast approached. Ravens came hourly, wings weighted by frost. Sisterton burned, its watchtower toppled by ice giants that strode the shoals. Deepwood soldiers repelled first white attack, bodies burning blue. Eastwatch's outer gate shattered. Lord Commander Mormont missing. Dragonstone fleet at last under sail. Obsidian cargo bound north. In the gloom of Winterfell's solar Robb unrolled a new map. The north, but blank above the wall save for a single broad arrow labeled darkness. He set pebbles for host movements. Mormont spears here, White Harbor bows there, reed skirmishers along neck causeways. He placed a tiny gray stone beyond the wall, at the source of Then Valley. That's John, he told Domeric, who stood hands clasped behind. How do you know? Because Bran saw. And brother's blood is flint. Strike it, and sparks fly wherever ice is darkest. Domeric's eyes were impossible to read in half-light. Do you truly mean to march beyond the wall? Yes. You'll leave a kingdom unguarded. I'll leave a hearth defended by every soul who calls it home. If the wall falls, no throne stands. If the wall holds, a stool is thrown enough. A long silence. Domeric broke it. I will go with you. Robb looked up. Your place may be here. I owe the North a life. Better it be spent where the scales tilt. He clasped the boy's arm. Catelyn, watching from doorway, swallowed pride and worry both but said only, Then may the gods watch. By the equinox the obsidian convoy reached White Harbor. Black daggers and arrowheads packed in sawdust casks. Maesters inserted each head onto ashwood shafts dipped in pitch. Girls and Sansas. Sewing hall feathered fletchings dyed red, so bowmen might snatch the right arrows blind in battle frantic. In the yard, Myrcella drilled with a light sword forged by Mikken. Her stance mirrored the water dance she'd watched Arya practice. The former princess moved with a grace that belied soft hands. When Lord Wyman himself came to see, he chuckled deep. A Lannister lioness learning wolf song, he said. The world has turned on its head. No, Myrcella answered between thrusts. It's standing straighter now. Wyman's laugh rang off stone. That very dusk a raven from King's Landing. Renly declared Great Council transferred to Winterfell, citing roads unsafe and White Walker threat greatest to north. Stannis concurred in Kurt's signature. Tyrell delegates already on the march with grain, goats, and 2,000 spears. Even Tywin Lannister, cornered by expectation, sent his sister son Sir Davin with 500 men, for mutual survival. The letter bore splatters of red wax, like drops of heart's blood. Robb crumpled parchment. The realm comes north because fear drives. But fear may yet teach unity quick as any sermon. Nyawo. Catelyn allowed herself a small smile. They follow the heart tree's roots now. Then may its branches shelter us. 12 days later, the advance outriders of Highgarden, and the royal host behind, filed through Wintertown. Horses snorted plumes. Tyrell trumpeters dared a merry tune, shivering lights onto soldiers' cheeks. Lord Willis rode in a high-wheeled litter drawn by 4 white destriers. When Robb embraced him at the gate, Willis pointed skyward. I brought seeds, he said. Spring will need help remembering itself after such a winter. Barrels of ryegrass, crimson clover, turnip and barley, frames for glass houses, even bees to coax orchards awake again. Behind Willis came Brienne in Sapphire Guard's mail, escorting Renly on a mottled charger. The Storm King clasped Robb's forearm. Harrenhal's shadows still cling, he said. But the new day smells sharper here. Even Tywin's envoy arrived with some grace. Sir Davin presented Robb a single sword of castle-forged steel. My uncle regrets he cannot attend until his hip mends. He hopes this token will cut grief instead of throats. Robb accepted, reading between lines. Tywin too cautious to travel, too prudent to stand out. They made camp from Wintertown fields to Kings Road mile markers, tents cresting snow like dragons' sailbacks. The night glittered with cookfires as far as Broken Arm Tower. Sansa singers led ballads inside the holdfast. The Ashen Wolf, the Last Giants, the Maiden, and the Moon. Outside, rain of silver sparks rose with embers. Bran presided at First Council inside the Great Hall. Lordlings perched on benches hauled from every smithy. His thin voice rang unusually strong, commanding hush. "We gather not to carve lines but to break one. The line that divides living from dead," he said. "Steel failed the dead once. Now living wield fire and stone birthed in earth's first bed. Obsidian, Valyrian, dragonglass. Names of one doom to those who cannot breathe." Renly and Stannis nodded grim accord. Tyrell lords traded glances. Sir Kevan represented House Lannister, face tight with unease. Robb unrolled new map. The wall drawn thick, the gift beyond, arrows showing their campaign. Rangers from Castle Black will guide. Spearheads of Tyrell, Mormont and Glover strike haunted forest to smash white columns. Stormlander heavy horse holds Queenscrown Heights in reserve. Reed Crannog archers sweep flanks through lakes. And we, wolves, roses, stags and lions together, march to the fist of the first men to meet what dares remain. Nattern. Stannis leaned forward. "You presume the wall stands to our rear." "It will," Robb answered. "The Night's Watch braces with obsidian lines. If breach comes early, we fall back to Moat Cailin, burn the neck, deny them south." "Mudas." A murmured gasp. Burning the neck meant torching lifeblood of many houses. Robb let the weight settle. "I pray we need not," he said. "But I will slit my own land's veins before I watch my people rise cold against me." Eyes lowered. Head after head dipped. Reluctant respect, bound by necessity. The council adjourned beneath thunder of direwolves howling in unison, as if night itself beat on the gates and found them barred. In the outer yard, gray wind sniffed the incoming wind. Flakes swirled again, yet a tang beneath thrilled Robb's senses, ozone sharp, like storm forging steel blades aloft. Across the bailey, Arya juggled 3 obsidian daggers. Brienne caught one mid-arc, scold in blue eyes, but Arya only grinned. "Blades want to dance," she said. Wind's lullaby stiffened into roar in the week that followed. But by first new moon the grand host was ready. 32,000 souls, 2,000 horses, 100 wagons of provisions, 50 cages of ravens, 9 maesters, double that septons, a living folk turned caravan of purpose. The heart tree watched them depart. Robb knelt beneath bloody leaves, sword point touching roots. Bran spoke blessings born of some elder tongue. The air thickened until Robb felt the bark breathe back. Then he mounted, kissed his mother's gloved hand, and spurred north. They moved in 3 wedges. At the fore strode the direwolves, Grey Wind, Shaggy Dog, a half-grown she-wolf from Nymeria's wild pack that had trailed in secret and now padded beside Arya as if born of her shadow. Soldiers whispered that the gods sent the beast. Arya whispered that no god commanded wolves. They came where they willed. Past Long Lake, the snow-swallowed sun. Marchers bound scarves over mouth and eyes. Still the chill bit eyelids raw. At White Weir Crossing they met the first true whites. 24 men in half-rotted watch-blacks, eyes blue fire, claws of ice. The front rank recoiled, but Mormont's shield maidens held. Obsidian arrows hissed from ridge, meeting white flesh like boiling water on ice. Each shaft sprouted frost, and bodies collapsed to powder. The living stood stunned. Robb raised sword. "Burn the dust," he ordered. Pitch torches whooshed. The snow flashed green gold and fell silent. Word spread, quick as rumor. They can be killed. And something hotter than fear kindled behind every breastplate. They pressed on, skirting the gnawed wreck of the Weeping Water village. Charred beams crusted in rime. Children's toys frozen to steps. From the knoll beyond, riders sighted giants. Huge, shaggy, one dragging a broken mammoth tusk as club. Herding human figures roped by belts of raw hide. Through heavy lenses Maester Polt made out deer skulls bound over faces. "Cannibals of the Ice River," he said. Robb exhaled plumes. Let them pass. We fight one war. Night. Camp beneath the eaves of haunted forest. Tents wagged like tongues in slashing wind. In council hut, Robb lay new tidings. Scouts lost near the Shadow Tower. Maester Bowen Marsh claims the gate stands, but men vanish half a mile out. Stannis stroked his short beard. The wall is breached there. Renly shook head. Ice cannot be cut so jointed. It can break, Myrcella said softly. Men turned. The girl rose from maps, pointing at a seam inked in blue. The gorge beneath the western spurs. If meltwater ate the wall's feet in summer, weight could shear a slice. Stannis considered. A child sees what generals miss. Robb nodded. We divert 2,000 to Shadow. Plug the gap with fire trenches and beam palisades. Ramsay's pine tar barrels from the wolf's den will hold long enough. He paused. Each word pressed heavier than ice. Across from him, Tyrell captains waited, eyes deer-wide. Glover knuckles whitened on axe haft. He looked into every face. Fear, courage, cold. All one truth. We stand tomorrow, he said. And tomorrow is dawn. They reached the foothills of the Fist beneath auroras that writhed green like drakes chained across sky. The plateau ahead loomed black, ringed by dead trees broken into spears. Rings of ash told where Mormont's men had tried to burn their own supplies before retreat. Now the Fist stood silent. Renly's squire raised a horn. It had time for one mournful note before a gust snatched it silent. Then the snow moved. Not drift. Rank on rank. Shapes pale and stiff, rising like sleepers from shallow graves. Eyes blazed blue. Some wore the ragged black of watch, some bearskins, some the tatters of small folk clothes. Many bore no face at all. Flesh torn away to white mask of bone. They advanced without sound. Robb felt ice crack in his throat. He lifted sword. Loose. From ridges bowstrings thrummed. Red-fletched obsidian darts streaked, sowing black sky to white earth. Every shaft that struck burst a white into snow plume. But for each collapse, two more filled space. Again. Quivers emptied. Whites fell. Still they came. Stormlanders slammed pikes, shaping shield wall. Tyrell bowmen dropped flint firepots. Flames whooshed through drifts, but the dead marched unburning until tar kissed bone. Then they fell, screaming only in steam. Gray wind hurled himself into the nearest wave, jaws scissoring icy throats. Shaggydog followed, Nymeria's daughter beside, all three turning the tide where living lions wavered. Men rallied to the sight. Yet beyond the white vanguard, a deeper cold approached. The air itself dimming, a whiteness erasing thought. Into that curtain rode horsemen with armor of rime, helms spiked by frozen horns, blades thin and curved like sickled moon. Their mounts snorted frost that hung, mid-air, unmoving. The others. The first raised its blade. Light bent around the steel. Blue, black, star-bright. It pointed toward Robb. He had seen death, but this was the weight of extinction. Still, he spurred forward. Ice's brother's sword glowing faint in wakelight. Beside him thundered Brienne, unsmiling and unstoppable. Glover roaring, Renly himself antlered helm bobbing, and by his knee Arya on that shaggy pony, eyes bright as obsidian. They met beneath the leeward slope. Robb struck. Steel rang like bell on glass. Blade shattered to shards. The other's sword swung for his neck. Brienne's greatsword intercepted. Valyrian steel howled a note too high to hear. The other reeled. Steam exploded where the two metals kissed. Renly thrust a dragonglass dagger past Brienne's guard. It drove through armor like butter, sinking to hilt. Light burst inside the creature. White turned to cerulean fire, then shattered. Ice plume showered. The remaining others paused, assessing. But blue eyes beyond counted by hundreds. The horn sounded from ridge. 1, 2, 3. Robb's heart seized. 3. Others. But a fourth note boomed. A note he'd never heard. It rolled deep as earth, rising, pulsing. The whites paused. Snowflakes halted, mid-air. Even Aurora lulled. A figure on elk back emerged from woods. Cloak of patchwork feathers. Staff tipped with dragon glass spearhead glowing red. Eyes bright, but human. Bloodraven, Bran breathed where he watched from sled. The ancient ranger raised staff. Ravens burst from treetops. 1,000-strong, swirling black storm that dove upon the dead. Pecking, clawing, slicing at eye flames. Whites flailed. In their staggered ranks, the living punched forward. Stannis men lit pitch tridents. Manderly axemen hacked knee joints. Everywhere obsidian met frozen flesh. Bodies fell to blowing dust. The others retreated to ridge, regrouping. The ranger turned his elk, staff flashing. Then the ground moaned. The fist shook. From its base split, a crevasse vomiting blue light. Ain rose, larger than giants. Rib cage of dead ice, skull crowned with horns of frozen crystal, arms a tangle of spines. The great other whispered old wildling tales, but no living throat had named it and lived. Its roar froze marrow. The living line buckled. Bran's eyes rolled. He spoke through lips stiff. Wirewood. Call the fire beyond fire. Robb didn't understand, but Arya did. Dragonfire, he means. Renly shouted. We have no dragons? Myrcella ran, slipping through ranks to Bran's sled. She pressed her hands to his. Bran whispered then, a language older than men. The ground trembled anew. From the south horizon, a rumble. Drums? No, wings. 3 shapes blacked out half the sky. Dragons, scaled and massive. The exiled Queen Daenerys riding the largest, silver hair wild in wind. She had sailed from Pentos with fire born of grief. Her roar met the monster's bellow. Flames the color of molten gold poured from dragon throats. Snow vaporized. Whites ignited like tinder bundles. The great other shrieked, but swung a massive arm, shards scything air. One dragon veered, hide shredded by ice spear, yet it righted, wheeled, dove again. Robb seized the moment. Forward. His voice cracked but held. The living charged beneath raining sparks. Gray wind ran ahead, smoke fringing fur. Obsidian point met the great other's ankle. Shard embedded, glowing. Catelyn, of all souls struck. She had taken a spear, lashed obsidian edge. She hamstrung the titan. As it toppled, Daenerys' dragon seared the spine with white-hot dragon fire. The ice creature cracked. Light evaporated. Silence like a world ending descended. Snow resumed falling. Soft, normal snow. Whites without others command dropped, inert. The field steamed, covered in melt pools and shards. Men sobbed, laughed, knelt where they stood. Dragons circled once, then landed just beyond burnt ring. Daenerys slid off, eyed the living host wary but curious. Robb clutched, sword hilt, jagged but whole. He approached, helm and crook of arm. Queen Daenerys, he said. King in the north, she answered. Her dragons prowled behind, chains loose. I heard the dead walked, and that men with wolf banners fought them. They did, Robb said, voice hoarse. With every brother beside. She surveyed shattered ice bones. Today we shared enemy. Tomorrow. Tomorrow rolls with dawn, he said. We'll decide tomorrow. She studied him. Then Bran upon sled. Then great wolves licking wounds. Finally, she nodded. Tomorrow then. Dawn painted the field rose gold. Steam rose round charred pits where whites fell. Survivors walked hushed, touching shoulders, counting breaths. Robb stood upon the fist's crest. Southwards the land glittered white as cloth of honor, unmarred and quiet. Northwards the haunted forest brooded, but its darkness seemed thinner, as though some black lung had exhaled its worst and died. Stannis climbed to stand beside him. Not victory. Reprieve. Aye. Long enough, Robb said, to build what living need. Behind them Renly laughed with Brienne. Sansa bound Bran's hands in fresh linen. Arya fed Nymeria's daughter slices of elk. Myrcella and Domeric lifted tar pails, pouring on last smoking corpse. Willis Tyrell rode agriculture quotas beside dwarfed weirwood sapling he swore would thrive here. And Daenerys spoke with Catelyn, Strange fire in her eyes, not entirely dragon-born. Hope, perhaps, or kinship. Robb inhaled the dawn air. It tasted of ash, yes, but also of pine and distant sea spray. Of north, of home. The long night remained, but the day had shown its first honest blade of light, and that was enough for wolves. He raised his broken sword to horizon. Around its ragged edge new ice began to form, glittering amber in morning. An omen, or only frost. He couldn't tell. He only knew the living line had not broken, and while it held, story still grew. Below, horns hailed the sun's rim. Ravens took flight, bearing tidings across 7 kingdoms. That on the fist beneath dancing lights, men and women of every house had stood as one and lived. The birds wheeled, vanishing into blue as deep as any cold eye, but softer now. Alive. Robb Stark watched them go, and felt the first warmth of spring stirring beneath his frozen heart. In Uaj, the fires at the fist burned for 3 days, tall columns of smoke spiraling into the pale sky, visible leagues away. A marker for every raven and straggler seeking the living. Each morning the light seemed a little less blue, as if the ancient cold had finally loosened its claws upon the world. Men staggered among the ashes and the splintered bones of giants, dragging away what could still burn, stacking heaps of broken spears and shattered obsidian blades. Beneath their feet, the melted snow ran red and black, soaking into the old ground. At the edge of the field, Robb Stark knelt on one knee. Sword point buried in thawed earth, breathing hard. Gray Wind paced beside him, muzzle stained with soot and ice ash, ribcage heaving with exhaustion. The direwolf pressed his head against Robb's shoulder, sharing warmth and a trembling that ran deeper than mere fatigue. For 3 days and nights, the young wolf had led the living. Northmen, Stormlanders, Riverlords, Reachmen, and the strange new allies of Dragon and exiled Queen, against the dead. Only now, with the last white heaps smoldering, and the others melted to wind and powder, did he let his body sag. All along the ridge, the survivors stood watchful and dazed. Mormont spears blackened with frostbite, Tyrell archers unstringing their longbows with fingers blistered by cold, Stormlord knights peeling cracked plates from raw skin. Among them, Brienne limped with her arm in a sling, face unbowed, and Arya sat cross-legged with Nymeria's daughter, cleaning her blade, eyes hollow but alive. Bran lay in his sled, lips moving in silent prayer. Sansa knelt beside him, bandaging the scrapes on his arms, humming soft and wordless. Somewhere nearby, Daenerys and her dragons gathered close to their queen. Drogon's scales shimmered dull beneath the ashes. Rhaegal's tail curled protectively around the smallest children, huddled by the embers. The sight of dragons no longer stirred only fear. There was awe in it, and now, after the last night, gratitude. The old songs might yet bear new verses. Robb pushed to his feet, leaning on Grey Wind. Catelyn met him halfway, her face drawn and streaked with tears he had never seen fall, her hands trembling with weariness and pride. "We live," she whispered. He pulled her into a long, silent embrace. They burned the last white bodies at dusk as the wind shifted south and the sky cleared for the first time in months. The dragons circled above, loosing tongues of flame where firewood thinned, lighting the farthest piles. The living gathered to watch the pyres, Northmen and wildlings, Reach knights, Dornish scouts, even a handful of maesters and septons who had survived the long ride and the longer night. Some wept openly. Others stared at the flames, lips pressed white, eyes empty. That night, the survivors feasted together, if such a word could be used for boiled barley, tough elk, and hard bread. Yet there was singing, a ragged, fierce harmony led by Sansa and the Bear Island women, with Myrcella's clear voice braiding through. The dragons watched from the far side of the field, and the direwolves slunk among the tents, pausing to nose at wounds and sleeping children. Robb sat with Bran and Arya beside a dying fire, Catelyn and Sansa close, the others scattered among the rings of survivors. For a time no one spoke, content to listen to the distant singing and the faint hiss of falling snow. Bran's eyes, so pale in the firelight, never left the stars overhead. Do you feel it? Bran whispered at last. The stillness. Robb nodded. It's as if the land is breathing again. As if something old has passed. Arya's hand curled around Needle. Not all has passed. There are still shadows on the snow. Sansa laid a hand on her sister's shoulder. We'll face them together. Bran closed his eyes and shivered. Dreams linger. I saw the great other fall, but others watched. From far east, from broken castles beyond sunrise, from the sea's edge. The dark is only driven back, not gone. Catelyn smoothed his hair. Then, let us rebuild the fire, and keep it burning. Robb glanced at her, then at the others. That is what we'll do. In the north first, but not only here. The next day dawned bright, sun reflecting blinding white off new snow. The sky clear blue as summer banners. The living buried their dead by the score, mounds of stones and cairns rising in rings around the fist, each topped with a simple token. A wolf's fang, a broken arrow, a twist of dragon glass, a strip of green cloth, a stag's antler. Catelyn led prayers at the largest cairn, Bran and Sansa flanking her. Maester Polt and the Septons reciting names until voices gave out. Even Daenerys stood among the mourners, a silent figure in silver and black, her face streaked with soot. When the last stone had been laid, Robb summoned the council. They gathered in the old watch shelter, a squat, scorched ruin with its roof patched by tarps and dragon hide. Walls lined with shields from half the kingdoms. Renly gaunt and wild-eyed, with Brienne by his side, his blue and green surcoat stained with blood. Stannis, grim and silent, ringed by black brothers and battered Baratheon men. Lord Willis Tyrell, wheeled in by his household, white-faced but calm. Sansa, representing House Stark. Arya and Myrcella quiet at her back. Glover and Mormont and Reed. Domeric Bolton, head high, hands folded. Even Tywin Lannister's envoy, Sir Davin, sat at the far end, eyes sunken but wary. Daenerys came last, flanked by Ser Jorah and her blood riders, her dragons left with wildlings and children on the high ground. When she entered, men stood. Even Stannis rose, if only to mark her passage. Robb began. The dead are defeated, for now. But north of the wall, they may gather again, or elsewhere. We must do more than survive. We must build a peace that keeps the living strong, even when the wind turns cold again. Renly laughed, ragged. You sound like a maester, or a dreamer. Stannis' eyes narrowed. A dreamer saved us. Let him speak. Robb looked around the battered hall. The realm bled itself dry for 1,000 years. For what? The Iron Throne? Old feuds? All our banners have been soaked by blood. I say, let them stand for something new. Willis Tyrell nodded. You mean to break the throne? I mean to melt it, if that is what it takes. No more king to rule all, but a council of equals, north and south. River and sea, fire and ice. A hush fell. Arya's eyes widened. Myrcella's lips parted. Even Daenerys tilted her head, thoughtful. Stannis' voice cut the silence. You would break the oaths of 10,000 men and women. And who sits at the head of this council? Robb shook his head. No one. We sit in a ring, as the old kings did beneath the heart trees and the stones. The king is the council. The council, the king. Daenerys spoke at last. And what of House Targaryen? I am the last dragon, the last of my line. Robb's voice was steady. You brought fire when fire was most needed. The world owes you a debt. If you wish to rule, let it be as one among many, not above. Daenerys looked at the scarred survivors, her dragons, the gathered lords, and then at Robb. Her nod was slow but deep. Renly grinned. A ring of wolves, stags, lions, dragons, roses, krakens and bears. The old bards will need new rhymes. No one will. Willis added, and I will send them seeds, for song grows best in tended soil. There was laughter then, the first Robb had heard from all sides in many weeks. The ice in the hall seemed to thaw. They spoke long, sometimes bitterly. Some lords demanded more. Land, gold, titles. Stannis warned of the perils of anarchy. Tyrell and Glover and Mormont argued for guarantees, for justice for old crimes, for fair trade and the right of the North to decide its own path. At last, consensus was hammered out, as much from exhaustion as vision. There would be a great council, seated in Winterfell for 1 year, then to rotate among the 7 kingdoms. Each house would send 3 voices: noble, small folk and wise, maester or septon or healer. The wall would be rebuilt, stronger and higher, manned by watch, wildling and volunteers from every kingdom. The dragons would fly patrols. New roads would be built, and towns resettled by mixed folk. Grain would be sent north and dragonglass south. Coins minted with the 7 sigils entwined. A new order, fragile as a sapling in frost, but alive. When all was done, Robb stood with his family on the Fist's crest. Bran's hand gripped his, Sansa on the other side. Arya's arm linked with Myrcella's. Catelyn watched the sunrise, tears shining on her cheeks. "Is it over?" Arya whispered. "For now," Robb answered. "But not forever. It will never be over. That's what it means to live." They watched the sky lighten. Far to the north, the last aurora flickered and faded, replaced by the clean gold of morning. Winterfell awoke to a world changed. The refugees crowded into new halls, wildlings teaching farmers how to mend walls with packed snow and river stones, crannogmen showing smiths the secrets of peat fires. Manderley wagons rolled in with grain, and Tyrell greenhouses sprouted shoots by moonlight. The dragons basked on the walls, scaring crows and wolves alike. Every night, fires burned in the godswood and along the walls, bonfires to keep back the dark. Bran rode again, wheeled in a sleigh by Rickon, to the edge of the broken wall. There he met the children of the forest, who emerged from the last thicket to tend the new weirwoods growing in the snow. They spoke to Bran in a tongue no other heard, and taught him how to listen to the song of roots and sap, and the old stories that lived in the stones. Some nights, Arya crept with him to the crypts, searching for hidden doors and lost swords, promising to guard him with Needle forever. Sansa took charge of the kitchens and the hall, turning Winterfell into a home for all. Northman and Wildling, Reachman and Stormlander, even the wary Lannister men who lingered at the edge of the fires, remembering old oaths and forging new ones. She sang in the evenings, her voice ringing in the high rafters, and the old women wept to hear songs they thought lost. Robb met nightly with Daenerys and her advisors, planning patrols and harvests, and the rebuilding of the wall. Grey Wind slept at his feet, watchful and at peace, while Domeric Bolton studied maps and Myrcella learned the tongues of the north. Sometimes, late at night, Robb found himself in the godswood, kneeling beneath the heart tree, whispering his own prayers. Thanks for survival, pleas for wisdom, and quiet hopes for the years ahead. As the days grew longer, news trickled in. Giants returning to the hills, Krakens kept at bay by new fleets, the Dothraki roaming the open grass beyond the Gift, hunting with Glover Rangers and laughing at snow for the first time. The Night's Watch swelled with volunteers, new black cloaks and old men and women both. Some choosing the wall as atonement, others as duty, some for the hope of standing for the living against whatever might come again. One evening, as the last of the snow began to thaw, Daenerys called a council by dragonfire. The lords and ladies gathered in the shadow of the dragons, who circled above the high tower, their wings blotting the stars. "I must ride east," Daenerys said, "to ensure the shadows there do not rise. But the dragons will return to patrol these skies and watch for the dark. I trust you with my faith." "Into what?" Robb clasped her hand. "We are not enemies, not anymore." "No," she smiled. "But let us be more than that. Let us be kin, not by blood, but by oath and need, and the memory of this night." She departed with her blood riders and 2 dragons, the 3rd left to nest near Winterfell's hot springs, watched over by Arya and the wildling children, who learned to feed her goats and to sleep close by her side. Years passed, though none marked them by King's reign anymore. They marked them by the thaws, by the summer harvests, by the coming of new children, and the death of the last of the old. Some winters bit deep, but never as deep as the one that brought the dead. The wall became a city in itself, black and white and green, watched by every kind of folk. The north sent harvest every autumn, the reach sent honey and herbs, the stormland sent iron and fish. The great council met every spring, at Winterfell, at Old Town, at Sunspear, at Lannisport, even once at Pike, and never did one house hold sway for long. Robb grew gray at the temples. Grey Wind's muzzle whitened, but his eyes remained sharp. Sansa married Willis Tyrell and returned in spring, her children fierce and stubborn, their laughter echoing through the halls. Arya became a legend among the Rangers, riding the wilds with Nymeria's pack, her name sung as a warning and a hope. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, voice soft as moss, teaching each new generation the old stories and the new stories. Rickon hunted the woods and built towers taller than any before, watched over by Shaggy Dog, who grew as huge as legend and twice as wild. Domeric Bolton served as Warden of the East for many years, remembered for justice rather than fear. Myrcella became a wise woman in Winterfell, beloved by high and low alike, her golden hair a bright banner of peace. And sometimes, on cold nights when the fire burned low, Robb walked the ramparts and looked north, to the silent woods and the hills where shadows still waited. He did not fear them anymore. He knew the living could stand together, if they remembered the night when fire and ice and wolf and dragon stood as one. The bells of Winterfell rang at sunrise and sunset, not for war, but for the passing of another day. And when the first blossoms broke the last of the snow, and the young wolves howled at dawn, Robb knelt beneath the heart tree and gave thanks, not for victory, but for the chance to begin again. The story spread, as stories do. The children of those who survived sang them, and their children's children, until the memory of the long night became not a terror, but a warning. A promise that as long as the living remembered and stood together, there was nothing, not even the dead, that could conquer them. Thus did the North remain whole, and the realms of men find peace in a world reborn by fire, ice, and the stubborn, fragile courage of hope. May. Spring in the North was a subtle thing, less a single moment than a slow loosening of the land's clenched jaw. It began with the softening of the snow, the trickle of water along stones, the return of birds in flocks, shy and uncertain. By the third new moon after the long night's end, Winterfell's moats were flowing, and the first green shoots shivered in wind along the black earth. Farmers dug with frozen hands, not for a king's command, but for the hungry bellies that had made it through the dark. Robb walked the castle's parapets each dawn, watching the towers cast long shadows over the fields where tents had become cottages, and fire pits gave way to small gardens. From the highest turret, he could see almost to the woods where Arya ran with the direwolves, where wildlings taught Stark children to trap rabbits and stalk deer without being seen. There was a freedom to the land now, a sense that each new day was its own kind of victory. Sansa joined him most mornings, her face no longer pale with fear but alive with the flush of wind and purpose. She pointed out the new tiles being set on the rookery, the smoke from the bakeries, the rows of laundry strung from bough to bough. They remember, she told him, not just what they lost, but what they've built. We are different now. She was right. The realm had shifted, not only in banners, but in blood and custom. Houses that once clung to the old ways now welcomed the wildlings as neighbors. The first market day after the thaw, a tent was set at the edge of Winter Town, and there men and women of the mountain clans bargained with fishermen from the White Knife and Crannogmen, with nets heavy from the neck. A woman from Bear Island haggled over a spindle of wool with a fisherman's wife from Gulltown, their laughter rising into the morning. None spoke of kings or wars, only the price of eggs and the rumor of wolves in the barley. In the evenings, the great hall filled with people, lords, small folk, singers, smiths, healers. Some nights, old enemies shared benches. Lady Mormont drank beside Sir Davin Lannister, and even a handful of Freys, chastened and fewer, came seeking amends. Each meal was a council, and each song a memory stitched into new hope. Sansa and Myrcella led the singing, and Arya sometimes joined in, her voice sharp as a northern wind, the lyrics braided with wild laughter. The first great council to be held at Winterfell opened under clear skies and banners flying from every tower. Robb took his place at the council ring, flanked by Sansa and Catelyn, with Bran near the heart tree in the Godswood. The lords and ladies of the new realms arrived. Willis Tyrell from the Reach, Lady Namella Tolan for Dorne, Renly and Brienne for the Stormlands, Tormund Giantsbane representing the Free Folk, Lord Wyman Manderly, Domeric Bolton, and the new Lord Reed for the North, Sir Davos for the Riverlands, and Myrcella for the Crownlands. The first day was given to remembering the dead. The names read aloud, one by one, in a hall so crowded the walls sweated with breath. When the last was named, Sansa sang the dirge of the last giants, and even the Ironborn stood in silence. Then the council turned to its business. Rebuilding the wall, the matter of dragons and their eggs, the laws that would govern trade and peace, the renewal of the Night's Watch. There were fierce debates and stubborn pride, but none dared raise swords. The old terror of the dead had left everyone with a hunger for life that outlasted old feuds. Bran's wisdom was sought by many wildlings, lords, even Daenerys envoys, who had sailed from east with letters bearing her broken dragon's sigil. Bran spoke little, but when he did, all listened. He taught the council to think in circles, not lines, to leave space for voices that had never before been heard. He counseled patience, and warned them to remember the weirwoods, for the trees will recall what men forget. The rebuilding of the wall became the council's first great work. Stones and logs were hauled by teams of men and giants together, bound with new mixed mortar, stronger than ice. Manderly ships ferried dragonglass and lime along the coast. Tyrell wagons brought grain and seed. At night, fires burned along the wall's length, 1,000 small suns to hold back the darkness. Wildlings settled in the Gift, their children running barefoot in the meadows, watched over by both rangers and maesters. Robb spent many days at the wall, riding with the builders and the new Black Brothers. Jon's name was spoken with reverence, and songs of his last stand at the fist of the first men became legend. The Crows, as they still called themselves, wore cloaks of black wool sewn with green or blue, each stitch marking an act of peace or courage. The watchtowers were manned by men and women both, and ravens carried messages from one end of the wall to the other faster than any horn. One cold morning, Arya returned to Winterfell with a wildling boy in tow, his hair matted and hands nimble as a fox. She announced he would be the first wildling to serve as page to a northern lord, and made him swear his oaths before the heart tree. "There's no one left to hate, only work to do," Arya said, and none challenged her. In the Godswood, Bran spoke often with the children of the forest. He learned their secret names, and they his. Sometimes, when he sat beneath the heart tree, his skin would turn as pale as the bark, his eyes far away, and afterwards he would speak of things yet to come, strange summers, green fires, dragons returning to the east, storms at sea. But when he spoke of darkness, it was never of the dead alone, but of men forgetting, and the need for stories to keep the world awake. Sansa, in her turn, transformed Winterfell's halls. Under her eye, the solar was remade with tapestries and glass, the rookery filled with new birds and flowers. The kitchens taught to use herbs and spices, traded from as far as the Summer Isles. Each feast became a celebration of what the realm could be. North and south, old and new, the highborn and the hungry sitting side by side. Myrcella worked beside her, learning every name and every trick of making a house into a home. Even Lady Mormont conceded gruffly that Sansa knew how to tie the knots that hold the roof together. As spring advanced, word spread that Daenerys dragons had returned from east, bearing news of new threats beyond the Jade Sea. She herself came north again, hair silvered by wind and time, eyes bright with purpose. She brought with her envoys from distant lands, Karth, Ashai, even Yi, men and women eager to learn how the North had survived. The council welcomed them, wary at first, but soon curious. The world, it seemed, was wider and more filled with wonders than any had dared to dream. The children of Winterfell grew up wild and strong. Rickon ran with the direwolves and the children of the forest, returning with stories of secret valleys and ancient stones. Sansa's children, born to Willis Tyrell but raised on northern snow, learned to hunt with Arya and to tend gardens with Myrcella. Bran grew older but stranger, sometimes so silent he seemed part of the tree itself, sometimes suddenly wise and sharp as frost. Arya was everywhere and nowhere, her name a song on every wind, her shadow crossing the wild hills beyond the wall. Robb aged, silver threading his hair, but his shoulders never slumped. Grey Wind moved more slowly, yet always walked at his side, and when the wolf died, it was in the Godswood, with Robb's hand on his fur and Bran singing the ancient words. The Heart Tree's face wept red tears that night, and all of Winterfell mourned. Robb buried Grey Wind beneath the old roots, planting an apple tree atop the grave, and in years to come the fruit grew sweeter than any in the realm. The council met every spring, and with each year it grew more varied. Krakens from the Iron Islands, archers from Dorne, woodcutters from the Neck, even a princess from the Summer Isles, who taught the children to swim in the coldest pools. The realm's troubles never ended: floods and drought, the wildfires of the summer, sickness and hunger. Old hatreds rekindled, but always after every quarrel they remembered the night they stood together at the Fist, and they found ways to begin again. One summer, news came that a great ship had arrived at White Harbor, bearing men and women with golden skin and voices like bells, from lands even the maesters had never met. They brought gifts, silks, strange glass, tales of their own long night, and in turn, learned to love the North's hearth and snow. Sansa welcomed them, as she had all the others, and their children soon ran with Rickons in the woods. In the years that followed, the wall held. The dead did not return, though from time to time, wildlings would whisper of strange lights far to the north, or a shadow moving in the snow. But the council kept the fires burning, and the watch stood ready, and the stories of the long night were taught to every child before their first hunt. Robb lived to see his children grown. He watched as Bran passed the wisdom of the trees to a new greenseer, as Arya led expeditions to the Shivering Sea and beyond, as Sansa's daughter was chosen as the First Lady of the Council, as Rickon's sons rebuilt the broken towers along the wall. Myrcella ruled Winterfell in his stead for a time, her golden hair and kind heart beloved by all. Domeric Bolton, having proved himself true, founded a school of healing in the east, where masters and wildling wise women worked side by side. In his final days, Robb walked the Godswood every morning. He paused beneath the Heart Tree, feeling the rough bark, whispering old words, remembering faces gone, Ned and Catelyn, Jon Grey Wind, the friends lost at the Fist. He watched the sun rise over towers rebuilt, and fields green with new wheat, heard the laughter of children and the howling of wolves, smelled bread and wood smoke, and the sweetness of apple blossoms. One morning, as a soft rain fell, Robb did not come down from the Godswood. Bran found him sitting beneath the Heart Tree, eyes closed, face peaceful. He seemed not old nor tired, but as if he listened to a song only he could hear. The bells rang all day for the young wolf, for the king who would not be king, for the man who broke the long night and mended the world. They buried him beneath the apple tree, near Grey Wind, with all the banners of the realm twined together, and every child of the North learned his name and his story. The realm endured, not in the peace of kings, but in the work and memory of those who stood together. The Great Council became the heart of the world, a place for quarrels and laughter, for stories and song. The wall stood, the forest flourished, and the North became a land of many peoples, many tongues, but one promise: that as long as the fires burned and the wolf sang at night, the living would never again bow to darkness. So the tale of Robb Stark became legend, woven into the Heart Tree's red leaves, carried by ravens and by children's laughter. The world went on, never free of trouble, but ever new and ever brave, a world remade not by victory, but by hope. Key. Time passed quietly at first, like sunlight moving across old stone, slow and sure. The years after Robb's passing did not carry the hush of peace so much as the music of new beginnings, bittersweet as spring snow. The North, ever wary of fate's return, learned to live with its shadows, and grew wise enough to cherish the light that followed. The apple tree above Robb's cairn grew broad and full, its roots gripping the earth above both man and wolf. Each autumn, its fruit was gathered and pressed for the harvest feast. The first cup poured out beneath the heart tree in silent memory. The children of the north, highborn and low, wildling and southron, giant and cranogman, learned that a land is not remade by kings or councils, but by the hands of those who plant, build and forgive. Sansa wore silver in her hair before her 30th winter. But her voice never faded. As Lady of Winterfell, and later as Lady of the Council, she presided over springs and summers, winters both cruel and gentle. She learned all the secrets of growing things from the Tyrells, coaxed tomatoes to thrive in glasshouses, grew sweet figs in sheltered courtyards, and brought rosemary and orange peels from Sun Spear to line the flagstones of her halls. She adopted the simple customs of the free folk, marriage in the open air, birthing feasts with drums and horn, and her own children grew up hardy as the pines that ringed the godswood. Her firstborn daughter, Lyanna, was wild and solemn, and as fair-haired as any Lannister. Her son Edric was quiet, his hands always covered in soil and ink. Sansa taught them the songs of the North and the laws of the South. When they asked her of the long night, she told them only that courage was a kind of hope that could be learned and taught, that every sorrow had its answer in a shared table and a story. Bran watched from the heart tree as seasons spun. He grew thin as a reed but never frail, for the old god sang in his bones. He no longer rode in his chair, preferring instead to sit or lie among the roots. Young greenseers and skinchangers came to study under him. Reeds, woods, snowborn orphans, even a blind boy from Old Town with a crow's clever tongue. Bran taught them to listen, to wind in pine needles, to water rushing through the crypts, to the silent conversations of mushrooms and moss. When one of his pupils, a girl with hair black as crow feathers, first saw through the eyes of an eagle soaring above the wall, Bran only smiled and pressed her hand. Arya was a rumor, a shadow that passed through towns at dusk, a streak of gray fur among the birches, a glimmer of light across black water. She spent her winters with the Rangers, her springs on the lonely light or sailing with Myrcella's kin. Her name was a watchword in every tongue. Nymeria's wolf in the north, the apple rider in the free cities, the ghost of Old Town to the maesters who doubted her tales. She sent letters back, never more than a few lines, sometimes only a feather or a pressed flower. News that she was alive and learning, teaching and mending, never content with rest. When she did come home, it was without warning, her arms full of strange gifts and stranger stories, her laughter fierce as ever. Rickon became a legend in his own right, riding farther north than any Stark before him. With Shaggy Dog at his side, he mapped the ice rivers that wandered into the white, marked lost cairns with runes, befriended mammoth herders, and built bridges of wood and bone across chasms no map had ever shown. He loved a wildling woman, Nella, with hair the color of lichen, and their children grew up knowing both the wolves howl and the bears dance. Rickon never took a lord's title, but when he returned to Winterfell, his brother's sons called him the North's lost son come home. The Great Council, as Bran had once dreamed, was not always easy. Arguments still flared. The Ironborn raided, then sent wheat in apology. The Dornish feuded with the Reach over the rights to river water. Tyrell merchants pressed for coin instead of barter, and old houses grumbled about wildlings seated at the council's lower tables. Yet no sword was drawn in anger. For each year the memory of the fist, of the fire and the frozen dead, was renewed in story, song, and silence. Daenerys dragons ranged far in those years, hunting krakens at sea, driving off the last of the shadow lions that stalked the Red Mountains, and even roosting once atop the wall itself. The Queen of the Dragons became a trusted friend to Winterfell, and her visits were celebrated with bonfires so large the night turned to day. Sometimes she brought news from distant lands. The rise of new gods in Et, the return of mages to Korth, the quiet spread of the old Valyrian tongue along the Jade Sea. Always she left one dragon behind, Valar or Jagar, or even the fierce gold one the children called Sunscale. to keep watch, to befriend the wolves, to fly patrols with the Night's Watch. The wall was rebuilt, not as it had been, a barrier of ice and fear, but as a chain of strongholds, with villages nestled at their feet, warm halls lit by lanterns and laughter. The watch became a calling for many, and it was said that more men and women joined for hope of adventure than from sentence or desperation. The wildlings and crows became kin, and though they quarreled as often as brothers do, their feasts were famed from Skagos to the Shadow Tower. Jon Snow's memory was kept with reverence, his likeness carved in the new Watch's hall at Castle Black. Every new brother and sister of the Watch touched their hand to the pommel of his statue's sword when they took their vows. And every spring his story was told around the fire, of the boy from Winterfell who gave up everything for the living, who died and was reborn in song. Myrcella's wisdom shaped many years. She became a counselor to Sansa and the council, known for her patience and her laughter, her steady hand when disputes ran hot. She loved children and became their champion, building schools and gardens where none had grown before, teaching wildlings and southern kin alike to read, to heal, to listen. When she died, old and content, the bells of Winterfell rang from dawn to dusk, and her name was woven into the next generation's songs. Domeric Bolton's School of Healing flourished at Last Hearth. There, the maesters learned new cures from free folk, from the green magic of the woods, from the strange powders of distant Essos. The Bolton name was redeemed, not by blood, but by acts of mercy and labor. No Bolton ever took a lord's title again, but their green-cloaked healers were welcome in every hall. Bran's passing was as quiet as a snowfall. One spring, he was found beneath the heart tree, his eyes open, his mouth curved in a faint smile. They said he had become the tree itself, that the old gods spoke through him now, that every bird in the wood carried a little of his spirit. The greenseers who had studied under him continued his work, weaving tales and healing, teaching each new council that the world's memory is its heart, and that forgetting is the only true enemy. The years turned and turned again. The world did not lose all its fear or pain, but it learned how to bear both. Wars flared far away, and the North sent help when called, but never armies for conquest, only banners for aid. Sometimes the old dangers whispered in snow and ice, but always the fire was ready, and the walls were manned. Children grew up with stories, and the stories grew with them. They learned of Jon and Daenerys, of Arya and her wolves, of the long night and the dawn that followed. They sang the song of the last giants and the apple rider, and every year, on the day of the harvest feast, the first cup of cider was poured on the earth for Robb and Grey Wind, and the last song sung for the world that was lost and the one that was found. In Old Town, the Citadel finally sent its maesters north in great numbers, eager to learn what had happened during the darkness and how the North had survived. The maesters of the North and the wildlings' wise women quarreled and wrote and studied, and from this meeting sprang a new order, a university with students from every kingdom, free to learn and to teach. One of Arya's daughters, bold and laughing, sailed to the Jade Sea and beyond, and returned with ships full of cinnamon and silk, tales of cities where the sun never set and where dragons were carved in jade. Sansa's son, Edric, became Lord of Winterfell in his turn, and built a library to rival Old Town's, its windows set with glass that glowed in every color at dawn. Rickon's children tamed wild mammoths, rode them along the wall, and taught the art to cousins from the south. Bran's greenseers spread the old wisdom far and wide, planting groves of heart trees in every realm, their red leaves a sign of unity and watchfulness. And so it was that Winterfell became not just a castle, but the beating heart of a world renewed. The North remained wild, but never cruel. The South grew rich, but not soft. The Wall stood not as a threat, but as a promise. The living would always watch, always remember, always come together if the darkness stirred again. In time, as all things must, the first generation passed away. But their stories, of love and loss, of war and peace, of the long night and the new dawn, remained, growing stronger with each telling. The old fears faded into legend, and the new world, built with patient hands and stubborn hope, endured. On the 1000th night after the fire at the Fist, a child was born beneath the heart tree. The wise women said she would live 100 years and never see darkness as her mothers had. When she grew, she planted seeds all across the north, and from those seeds rose new trees, new towns, and new songs. Her laughter echoed with the wolves, and her dreams were filled with the voices of the old gods, and sometimes, in the hush before sunrise, she heard the young wolves howl, far away but glad, running still beneath the apple blossoms. A.K. The seasons wheeled, and as years melted into decades, the realm changed again and again, shaped not by war or the whims of kings, but by the slow work of hands, the steadfast turning of the earth, and the memory that the night could always return. The north, once a cold warning at the edge of the world, became a green and living land, as full of laughter as legend. Every spring, the roads to Winterfell filled with pilgrims, some seeking blessings from the heart tree, others drawn by tales of dragons, giants, or the living council where anyone, even a crofter's son or a wildling girl, could speak. Each planting season, farmers brought first fruits and wildlings brought carved antlers, the tribute not of tax but of belonging. The old towns rebuilt, and new villages appeared where once the land was too cold or wild, and the marshes of the neck became a patchwork of water gardens and floating houses, their lanterns flickering like a necklace of stars at dusk. The wall, once seen as a tombstone for hope, stood transformed. The castles along its length, Castle Black, Eastwatch, Shadow Tower, Greenguard, and more, became bustling towns, each a knot in the border where Watch, wildlings, and southerners mingled. Every year, on the eve of the first frost, the Watch held a great feast to honor those lost in the long night. Men and women in black cloaks told stories of Jon Snow, Mormont, and the giants, and the hall rang with the laughter of wildling children learning the old songs from maesters and marshmen. The wildlings themselves thrived, holding the gift in freehold, their own chief sitting beside the lords of the north at each spring council. They kept their ways, but added new ones, books in their tents, healing from the Boltons, steel and glass from the south. The children of Tormund Giantsbane, huge, red-haired, always ready to sing or brawl, became both legends and peacemakers, the giants of the council, reminding all that laughter was as precious as fire. To the south, in the Riverlands and the Reach, peace bred invention. The fields near the Trident grew double harvests, the fords and bridges repaired and improved. The Tyrell greenhouses, seeded by Sansa's lessons and Bran's dream of old glass gardens, were copied from Dorne to the Vale, yielding figs and lemons, rosemary and mint even as snow fell outside. Old enemies became trading partners, and laughter coin crossed rivers more easily than any army. In Lannisport and Casterly Rock, the Lannisters never fully lost their pride, but Sir Davin and his children became known for their stubborn justice. Gold from the hills repaired broken castles, built new roads, and filled the libraries of half the realm. Lannister ships protected the coast from raiders, their banners flying beside those of the North, the Reach, and the Iron Islands. The Ironborn, under Lady Yara and her kin, became famed for their traders rather than their reavers. They sailed to distant Valyria, even the Summer Isles, and returned with spices, silk, and stories. Far to the south, Dorne flowered. The Martells built shaded halls and schools, and Myrcella's memory lived in gardens that wound through Sunspear, tended by children of every color. They sent oranges and wine northward, and in return asked for apples and stories. Even the free cities came in time to respect the North's stubborn honor. A slow trade in books, glass, and memories made richer both sides of the narrow sea. The dragons, at first rare and wild, became both guardians and riddles. Vaelalar, the old she-dragon, nested high above the Dreadfort, her wings sheltering the valley below from snows and storm. Jagar and Sunscale ranged from Skagos to Oldtown, their flights an omen of peace or warning, their shadows a comfort more often than not. Sometimes, dragon eggs would be found in the north, warm beneath the ashes of a hearth or among the roots of an apple tree. Each was hatched with ceremony, and the young dragons were raised by council and community. Never one master alone. Their names grew with them. Hearthfire, Frostwing, Hope's Ember, and Starless, the black dragon that watched over the Watch's wall. Not all changes were so bright. Famine struck some years, storms toppled towers, and sickness carried away beloved faces. Yet these hardships were faced as one. Council after council called to meet in Winterfell's hall, or in the great field beneath the heart tree. The children learned, as their grandparents had, to plant extra for neighbors, to leave the first bread at the heart tree for luck, to send ravens for help, rather than for warning. The shadows of old rivalries sometimes flickered, but always the memory of the dead, of what could rise again, kept peace alive. On feast days, the old stories were retold, but now, with laughter and with joy. Sansa, white-haired but still strong, presided with Willas at her side, and their grandchildren called her the Summer Queen. Arya, when she returned, brought new tales of strange cities across the sea, of whales as large as castles, and of her journeys with Nymeria's wild descendants. Rickon's kin ran with wolves and herded mammoths along the shore, their bonfires bright against the night. Bran's wisdom lived in every grove and library, his green's ears planting heart trees from Sunspear to the Shadow Tower, teaching each region to listen for the voice of the world itself. No one remembered kings, only council. The stories of crowns faded, replaced by the tales of those who kept the fire burning. The council seats changed with the seasons. Sometimes a lord, sometimes a wildling chief, sometimes a healer or a weaver of baskets. None ruled for long, but all served, and the stories of their service became the true record of the age. Children grew up among wonders. Direwolves playing with dragon hatchlings, maesters with wildling apprentices, singers from the Summer Isles teaching new ballads to the halls of Winterfell. The bells that once rang for war now rang for harvest, for births, and for remembrance. When the first apple of each autumn fell, it was brought to Robb's cairn and left for the crows, a prayer for courage and for hope. In the 10th decade after the Long Night, a great festival was called. The Centennial Council met at Winterfell, with banners from every corner of the world. The hall was crowded with old and young, men and women, giants and dwarves, the voices of every tongue. Each told their story, and the stories joined in a single tapestry, of loss and renewal, of fear and hope, of standing together at the fist and living to see another dawn. On the last night, as the moon rose full and gold, the council gathered beneath the apple tree. The oldest woman in the realm, a green seer born in the year of the fire, poured cider on Robb's cairn and recited the names of the fallen. The youngest, a child of wildling and watch, sang the ballad of the young wolf and the night of fire. The dragons circled overhead, their shadows weaving with the wolves' howls and the laughter of the living. The world was not perfect, nor ever without danger or sorrow. Yet each year, when the first frost silvered the ground and the lanterns of the marshes gleamed like new stars, the North remembered. Fire is no one's alone, nor peace a gift to keep, but a task for every hand and heart. And so the living watched. And so the world endured, woven together not by steel, but by the stories and the courage of those who dared to hope. Aishi May. So the centuries turned, and the tale of the North and its children unfolded through the lives of those who tilled its fields, mended its walls, sang its songs, and kept watch beneath the apple tree at Winterfell. What once had been the seat of kings was now the living heart of a world where no single hand held the fate of all, and no night, no matter how long, could swallow the dawn. The apple tree flourished, its branches gnarled and strong, feeding birds and children alike, sheltering the cairn of Robb and the bones of Grey Wind. Each new council brought its gifts and its quarrels beneath those boughs, and each child of the North learned to measure the seasons by the taste of the first fruit, the blush of petals in thaw, the red leaves falling to crown the old stone. Every spring, envoys from distant realms arrived, their cloaks jeweled with frost or salt or desert dust. Ships from the Summer Isles rode the White Knife, sails billowing, their holds heavy with sweet wine, pepper, and tales of southern sun. Qartheen merchants sent gifts of glass and indigo, and the tall men of Yeti sent caged birds that sang only at moonrise. Dothraki riders appeared, laughing, eager to see snow, their children awestruck by direwolves and dragons. The dragons themselves were as much myth as flesh now, not counted as weapons, nor weighed as treasures, but honored as guardians and harbingers. Their shadows swept the wheat fields in planting time and curled across the ramparts when the watch lit their night fires. No rider claimed a dragon for more than a season. It was said the dragons chose whom to bear, and never the other way. When a young Tyrell lad rode Hearthfire over the neck, bringing the first news of a river in flood, the council declared a feast, and wildlings and maesters argued cheerfully over whether he should be called River Rider or Cloud Chaser. The Night's Watch endured, but its charge had shifted. No longer merely a wall against death, the Watch became the realm's memory and its shield. Scholars as often as sentries, judges and healers, gatherers of tales and keepers of the old ways. Their black cloaks bore bright stitches of blue, green, or silver, marking alliances and wisdom gained. Every child in the north could recite the Watch's oath before their 10th winter, and it was common for a daughter as well as a son to serve a year along the wall. As the land thrived, so too did the bonds between peoples. The marsh folk in Cranheim taught the arts of reed boat and net to the River Lord's children. Dorne's envoys brought orange saplings, and in return, Tyrell sent hardy wheat seed that flourished even in the coldest years. The free folk of the gift, and beyond the wall, sent tanned furs and tales of snow bears, and sometimes the heads of frostbitten, monstrous things that had wandered from forgotten glaciers. Every council resolved feuds with laughter, or at worst, with a contest of riddles, never swords. It was a world not without its darkness. Storms flattened crops. River ice broke at the wrong moment and stole away whole villages. Sickness flared and faded in waves. There were years when the apples failed, and years when wolves were driven to raid the sheep pens in desperate hunger. Once, a fever swept the western valleys, and the Boltons, true to Demaric's legacy, led healers into every village, refusing to let the memory of old sins poison the living. Yet whenever grief gathered, when a winter was longer than hope, or a summer burned the grass to ash, the people came to the God's Wood, and there beneath the heart tree and the apple's wide shadow, they remembered that they had survived worse, and that together they could outlast sorrow again. Sansa's great-granddaughter, Lady Alysanne, presided at Winterfell in the new era Toash. Her hair was dark, and her eyes as gray as a morning thaw. She was as stern as Catelyn in council, and as quick to smile as Sansa at song, a keeper of both justice and joy. Under her watch, Winterfell became not only a seat of council, but a haven for learning and for healing. The Hall of Lanterns, built by her cousin Edric, housed scrolls from every corner of the world, its floors mosaiced with glass and shell, its rafters carved with the stories of every council and every long night. It was there in her 15th year that a stranger arrived, a child with skin dark as midnight and hair in tight coils, carrying a harp and speaking with a lilt none had heard before. He called himself Nkosi and claimed to be the son of a ship's captain from beyond the Summer Isles. When he sang, the hall quieted, and when he spoke of his home, the youngest children whispered that dragons and lions slept in the same sun, and rivers of gold ran beside roads of dust. Alysanne welcomed him, for her great-aunt Arya had taught her the worth of a guest and the power of a new song. His stories braided themselves into the songs of the North, and soon the walls of Winterfell echoed with words in a dozen tongues. The children grew bold and curious, their eyes set as much on distant coasts as on the familiar woods. It was in these days that Arya's legend grew, for she had left not only kin and memory but children of her own. A son who sailed east beyond maps, a daughter who hunted mammoth with Rickon's kin. The name Nymeria passed through the lines of both wolf and woman, and it was said the old wolf herself still ranged the wild north, never tamed, but never forgotten. The festivals of the north grew more splendid with each generation. The autumn harvest was a riot of color. crimson apples and white cheese, honeymead and trout baked in clay, wildflowers braided into every child's hair. Each year, on the night of first frost, lanterns floated down the white knife, carrying prayers for peace and memory, and wolves howled from every hilltop. The old dead were remembered not with fear but with gratitude. The youngest recited the names of those who fell at the fist, and the oldest swore that the North would never forget. As the years unspooled, Brand's greenseers planted heart trees wherever they wandered. In Old Town, a weirwood grew at the center of the great university. In Sunspear, one shaded a courtyard where the children of lords and wildlings studied side by side. In Lannisport, the heart tree stood on a bluff above the sea, its roots tangled with apple and rose, its bark carved with runes of hope. No lord nor maester nor counselor could quite say when the trees began to dream. But all agreed that under their branches, the world felt both older and younger, as if time itself were a circle and not a road. In one bitter winter, when the wind roared and snow piled above the tallest barn, a stranger arrived at Castle Black. Old, hunched, eyes bright as polished jet, he claimed to have crossed frozen seas and seen lands where the dead still walk. The Watch received him with caution, but his warnings proved true. The next spring, a strange frost crept along the northernmost valleys, and the Watch, the wildlings, and the dragons took counsel. Together, they drove the cold back, fire and steel and song. And when the thaw came, the Watch carved new runes into the wall's gate. We do not wait for night. Tormund's grandchildren became the poets of the Watch, and one of their tales, the Song of Jon and Ghost, was sung at every council. The maesters learned to listen as well as teach, and the healing houses of the north sent their best southward whenever plague or famine struck. Boltons and Karstarks, Umbers and Manderleys, even the old names of Lannister and Greyjoy found common purpose. No longer did any child go hungry for long. No longer did the doors close at sunset in fear. The dragons, ever mysterious, returned each generation to Winterfell, some to mate, some to sleep away decades in the steaming caves beneath the castle. Each hatching was cause for festival, each flight of shadow and fire a sign that the world endured. The Watch told stories of how the dragon's fire kept the wall's foundations from freezing solid, and in the coldest years, their warmth made the difference between life and death. As centuries lengthened, the stories braided. Of the young wolf who broke the night, the lady who ruled with song, the wolf daughter who crossed the world, the crippled king who became the voice of the trees. The councils never ceased. The fires never went out. Each winter brought its troubles and its gifts, and each spring the apple tree budded anew. At the 1000th council, the world's banners flew from every turret and tent. Children from the Summer Isles, from Valyria reborn, from the wild coasts of the east and the green mountains of the west, all gathered at Winterfell. Under the heart tree, Alysanne's descendant, a girl called Rowan, who wore a wolf pelt and a necklace of jade, called the council to order. "We remember," she said, and the whole realm answered her in 100 tongues, with laughter and tears, and a storm of song. No one feared the night anymore, for they had learned that every night ends, and every dawn is built by many hands. And beneath the heart tree, in the shadow of the apple, the bones of Robb Stark and Grey Wind slept in peace, as the world they had saved dreamed on, alive, united, ever watchful, and free. Olmenin, Ainshar. Through endless seasons, the living tapestry of the North wove on, threaded with births and deaths, joy and sorrow, stories and silence. Time shaped the stones of Winterfell, the branches of the heart tree, the laughter in the halls, but it could not erase what memory and hope had built. Long after the names of old kings faded to echoes, the North's legacy endured in every hearth and council. The apple tree in the Godswood, now a sprawling giant, still marked Robb's grave with its blossom and shade. Each spring, as its pink and white petals drifted over the cairn, the people of Winterfell gathered for the feast of first fruit. Young and old, highborn and humble, wildling and Southron, all brought their own apples to mix in the cider, poured in a libation that honored not just Robb and Grey Wind, but every soul who had kept the long night at bay. Children grew up in a world that no longer taught them to fear winter, but to respect it, to listen for the shifting of ice in the rivers, the sigh of wind in pine boughs, the subtle omens in a sky of swirling aurora. Even so, the watch still stood vigilant. Their black cloaks fluttered along the wall, which now gleamed with new towers and warming halls. Black brothers and sisters welcomed wildlings, lowlanders, summerfolk, and distant travelers alike, all who came to serve and learn. Every year, the oldest and boldest among them traveled beyond the wall to map the changing wild, barter with the mammoth herders, and bring back stories of the white foxes and lost forests where snow fell like petals. At Winterfell, the council ringed the great hall in every season. No longer merely the lords, but a gathering of voices, farmers and crafters, shipwrights and singers, healers and maesters, rangers and wise women. The Lady or Lord of Winterfell presided, chosen by acclamation for wisdom, kindness, and the ability to listen. The role often passed not from parent to child, but to those whose hearts carried the North's memory and promise. Sometimes, the title belonged to a wildling, a reed from the marshes, or a child of the free folk with a gift for herding, or healing, or song. Stories, the realm soon learned, were its most valuable inheritance. Arya's descendants became famous for their tales, and every few years one would return from distant lands with a new legend or a scrap of forgotten song. Bran's Greenseers traveled from holdfast to holdfast, bringing the wisdom of the weirwoods and gathering dreams to record in the Hall of Lanterns. Sansa's bloodline, through Lady Alysanne, and then her heirs, watched over the arts of healing and growing, their gardens blooming even through late snow. Old Town's maesters, once skeptical of the North's ways, came to study at Winterfell, where the great library kept not just tomes of history and healing, but scrolls on wildling wisdom, dragon lore, and the art of peace. The Night's Watch, in time, sent envoys to the Summer Isles and Korth to learn new medicines and bring back rare seeds. The Wall's gardens flourished, herbs and fruit for food and healing, cultivated with equal reverence for both earth and sky. Dragons, though fewer than in the age of Daenerys, still swept the heavens from time to time, their shapes a dark exclamation against the clouds. The oldest, Valar, now nearly as massive as the keep itself, made her home on a stone tor above the Dreadfort, coming down only in deepest winter, or when the council called. New hatchlings were rare, and no man or woman ever claimed one by right. When a dragon flew with a child on its back, it was celebrated as an omen, not an inheritance. Sometimes, the dragons vanished for years, leaving behind only melted snow and distant roars. But always, they returned. And so did the wolves. Grey Wind's descendants ran the forests of the north, sometimes joining with Nymeria's wild pack that ranged from the Frostfangs to the Narrow Sea. On snowy nights, their howls echoed with the songs of the Heart Tree, and travelers said you could not be lost as long as a wolf watched you from the wood. Not all days were easy. In the 100th year after the long night, a plague came with the summer storms, stealing breath from children and elders alike. The council worked day and night, healers moving from farm to farm with medicines from the east, crafters weaving masks and boiling herbs, dragons burning the worst of the infected dwellings when needed. The losses were heavy, but the realm endured, bound together by a web of care and memory. When the last fire of morning faded, the people gathered for a festival of planting, digging, singing, weeping, and remembering. In those years, the wildlings grew prosperous, their villages clustering along the foothills and lakes north of the Gift. They bred sturdy horses and white-fleeced sheep, and their children learned the common tongue, Old Tongue, and even the runes of the first men. Some ventured south to the Reach, some became maesters or singers, some returned north as watch commanders or healers. Wildling art, full of snow and sun and beast, found its way into every hall and garden. The Ironborn, changed by generations of peace, sent merchant ships instead of reavers. They built swift longships and slow-bellied grain barges, carrying apples from Winterfell, wheat from Old Town, glass from Lannisport, and carved wood from the neck to every shore. Dorne, Sunspear's children, sent wine and olives, spices and laughter, and in exchange received furs, snowberries, and the stories of the North. At every council, the banners of the world mingled in the halls, serpents and roses, krakens and mermen, the silver dragon and the wolf, now not in contest, but in kinship. In Winterfell's Godswood, beneath the ancient apple and the weirwood's bloody leaves, the old rituals were kept, the first bread broken, the lost named, the newborn blessed. Each festival brought something new: dances from the summer isles, the midnight boat race of the wildlings, a harvest lantern walk around the walls, singing led by maesters and farmers alike. Bran's green's ears, ever fewer but never forgotten, told the council when the winds would turn, when a dry summer threatened, or the ice would break late on the rivers. It was said they saw into men's hearts, and their advice was weighed like gold. Generations waxed and waned. Lady Rowan, who ruled for nearly 30 years, left no children of her own, but fostered dozens: crafters, wildlings, maesters, even the granddaughter of a Dothraki horse lord. She died one night in her garden, under the apple tree. Her face serene, her hands folded over a flowering branch. Her funeral drew the world to Winterfell. Every family sent someone, every town, and hold fast. Every house, rich and poor, proud and humble. As the season circled, the council became a living school. Each year, new voices, new stories, new wisdom. When the world changed, when a new star appeared, or word arrived of distant war or strange magic, Winterfell answered not with fear, but with questions, readiness, and unity. Once, in the spring of a year that no one bothered to count, a horn sounded from the wall. Scouts reported that a strange frost crept down from the farthest north. Icicles that hummed in the dark, shadows that moved like broken moonlight. The council met, sending dragons, wolves, and Watch all North together. What they found was not a foe, but a memory. The bones of an ancient beast encased in blue ice, a single white eye shining in the night. With fire, song, and patience, they melted the ice, burying the bones beneath stone and prayer, marking the place with a new heart tree. The Watch brought back the old tale. The night may return, but it is always answered. The North's true legacy became not just survival, but the choice to build something new, always, again and again. Its people did not forget sorrow, nor did they surrender to it. Each generation learned anew to break bread with strangers, to mourn and to celebrate, to repair what was broken, and to plant for what was yet to come. So the story of Robb Stark and his time, the time of the young wolf, the dragons, the council, and the long night, became not a single tale, but a river of stories, branching and rejoining, ever flowing forward. In every village, by every fire, from Old Town to the Shadow Tower, the story was told that once in the dark, the living stood together, and from that, a world was made. The apple tree bloomed, and the heart tree watched, and the North endured. The living, always watchful, always hopeful, carried the memory of night in their bones, and the promise of dawn in their hearts forever.